a lot of states, Utah's not one of them, but you can, a private business can go to a city and get them to sponsor a bond. And it's written up such that the business is responsible for it, not the city. But the intention is to get a tax-free bond so that you pay a lesser fee. But it's a common practice, and bonding companies do it. Now, other than the reputational risk, I think that this has potential for lowering our credit rating.
Right.
So, you know,
You articulated what my biggest fear was is, I think the city should, to support what Dave said, there's absolutely no way I would approve something that could possibly harm the city's credit rating for a third party.
I just don't want to
not
set
all.
I don't want to even begin to set a precedence that we're even willing to consider bonding for a third party.
I think there might be a reason if you had a well-established, profitable company with assets and they could bring a good plan to the table for repayment. I think it'd be, at least it's open to consideration.
If there's a clear mutual benefit.
If there's a
that
reason
offsets
for that, we
offsets the
get it.
risk.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm not convinced that any of those criteria have been.
But for me, this would be setting a precedent that we are willing, to really just go out and consider a third party coming in and bonding through us, and I just have no desire to do that.
I think
Let me say one other thing though, quick. A potential conflict of interest were we to actually have a vote on this. I have 2 children that do attend Athlos, and so if it actually came to a vote situation, I would recuse myself. But I just want to be a part of the discussion because I feel like it represents the interest of the city as far as generally practicing on a bond.
their attorney in his email did say that they have an alternative for a taxable bond. He said his cost would be $20,000 to $40,000 more. However, big if, because I don't like the idea, but if we were to go with it, we would have to then turn around and say, you've got to pay our legal costs, because we would have to have legal costs to make sure we're okay. I don't think they'd save any money once they paid for our costs.
Yeah, I have to agree with David. I don't want to cut you off, but I've read all of the material, including emails and letters, et cetera, and I looked at it from the business side of things as well and read through all the documents, went, well, one, they've been turned down by not just one, but other agencies. They've gotten a warning from the charter school board that they're in danger of losing the charter, declining enrollments, and the balance sheet, et cetera. Like, just from a business point of view, it'd be hard to say, yeah, I'd lend you money. And then for all the other points that have been made, this is not a critical service that the city provides. Like, this is not what we're here to do. And I understand how we could help them, but there's risk to us, and it just doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, not going to belabor the point.
All right, we will move on to.
However, I do have some financing up. No, I'm just kidding.
We will move on to item 2.5, city manager job description discussion. This is for our discussion among the council, keeping in mind for those present that this is a discussion regarding the position which we are looking to fill. This is not necessarily a position for the interim that we are currently sitting in the room, who is awesome.
No, I'll just tell you the reason I requested it to be on there. I know we did discuss this a little bit in past meetings. I forget which one, but I know. But I know that there was a sentiment that we would wait until after the holidays and stuff because there was a feeling that we might not get any applications. But I think if we don't have it out there, we for sure won't get any. And if we have it out there, we might get some. And I believe that no matter if it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, or the middle of some month that doesn't have a holiday, I forget which ones they are, but people need jobs. And I think that we're in an interesting economy right now where a lot of people need different kinds of jobs. And so I think that there will be more people seeking good jobs. And I think that we did a good job not very long ago when we were looking for I don't know if headhunters is appropriate, but I'll call it that.
Recruiters.
Recruiters, sorry. Our recruiters, when we were talking about the economic development. So I know you had opportunity to screen a lot of those companies and stuff, and I thought maybe because we've already went through that process just recently, maybe we would be a little bit ahead of the game and be able to move forward faster in order, and I believe we need to take the correct amount of time finding the person, but I was hopeful that we get the word out there faster, gives us
Oh, the
more, a
word's
larger.
out there.
Well, it gives us a larger amount of time to screen people and to start receiving applications. That was my thought.
So Travis here is our HR manager. Yeah, what do you have to add?
So
do you
that's
got for
great.
us?
So to be honest, as a whole, from my HR experience, I think November is a fine time to post, to be honest, if we can move forward that quickly. December is a really hard time for people to look for jobs. Vacation times are coming up, holidays are coming up. And then January 1st, of course, with New Year's resolutions is also a great time. So I'm open for whenever. I think it's good to get it posted and at least get the word out there and get applicants coming in. This discussion, from my perspective, is about the job description. And I might be the only one in the room that gets excited about job descriptions.
Oh, come on.
But I find them very valuable, except for maybe Mayor. I find them very valuable. It sets our precedents for expectations of candidates who want to apply for the position. It also sets our interview questions on what we want to focus on and the skill set and the education and the requirements we want someone to come into our position for. So I really appreciate the time and everybody's invested into it already, and also the engagement behind a job description. I think this will really help us post for the position. So I am very open. We call this a roundtable, but I'm very open to your discussions on what you want to look at in the job description. We can go through sections, or if we just want to receive feedback and I can take that feedback and update the job description, I'm open to that as well.
I would just ask, starting off with, since you are our HR professional here for the city, is with your experience and your excitement that you clearly have, having reviewed currently where we're at on the job description, where do you see our strengths and weaknesses in what's currently there, and areas that you think we should be considering some potential modifications?
Yeah. I think the job description itself is solid. I think we cover everything that we need to, and I think a candidate would look at it and get a good understanding of the position and what the general expectations of the position are. I think one thing that would help me as we post the position is maybe what do we want to focus on? So I know there's been some different focuses here at the city. Do we look at the person's vision and drive for the city and where they're going to take us in the future? Do we focus on an experience in economic development? Do we focus experience on building culture or enhancing culture in an organization? Do we look at communication styles and how they communicate between high-level officials, right, versus the staff, and how that communication gets broadcast among all levels? So that's how I'd call it. Where do we want to, what skill sets do we want most in this candidate? You know, realizing we probably won't have everything perfect, but we want the ones that we want the most.
I think and I'll just say my piece and then I'll shut up and allow everyone else. I think that, to your point, I think the basics of the job functions are a given, meaning somebody that obviously has managerial experience, somebody that knows how to operate and prepare a budget. I think all of those things are a given when we're talking about this level of a position for a city. For me, based on the questions, and I appreciate the questions that you just asked, for me, I think the important things that I'm looking to focus on really, there's two things you just said there, is culture, what is their vision of the culture and what do they bring to enhance the culture that already exists here. Not saying that we can't. I think we've built a very good culture over time, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't come in and enhance what we've already done here. So culture is a big one. And then I think communications is huge. And that goes at all levels, both communications with obviously this body. If you've met us, you know what they're potentially getting into. And then obviously with the senior staff and how that person is able to communicate down through the rest of the staff of the city. So those are really two of the big focuses for me, because I think the essential job functions should be a given at this level.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. Communication is really important. I remember talking to someone one time, they said, oh, I don't know, I have big shoes to fill. And somebody said, no, your job isn't to fill someone else's shoes. Your job is to make your own footprints. And so I appreciate culture, but I think it's imperative that whoever comes in has to make their own footprints, because that's the idea behind it. They have to have ownership in. I think that's the only way you can effectively manage if it's your style of management. You have to be able to feel like you're not having to fit into an existing culture, but be able to bring those around you into the pathway and vision that you see forward. So that's why I think, just like Clint said, communication is critical, because not only to the director level, but to everyone on down, whatever line you go down, that they have to feel like they're part of that, and that communication has to matter, but so that they'll have buy-in to the culture that the new manager, or the direction that he'll take it in.
Thank you.
As I'm looking at the actual job description itself, I don't see that we have listed preferred qualifications. And I know sometimes that is intentional to avoid overranking a candidate that might have preferred qualifications but not the other things we're looking in for them. One of the things I don't notice on here is the request for an MPA. For me, I would be willing to consider somebody with maybe 4 years of city government experience that has a master's in public administration with that master's level degree as opposed to just a bachelor's. I think that or somebody who has multiple degrees in the fields and that kind of situation. I think that when you get to executive level leadership, education can, the higher education and graduate level education can make a difference, if only not required necessarily, but it can make a difference, and something that we should be willing to consider as something that might move a candidate up. Not saying that means would be the entire reason we'd look at somebody, but it's something I think we should, put in there. But I'm one of 5.
Could you do something then, Mayor, instead of saying minimum qualifications, could you say preferred qualifications? And that way, maybe they have a master in this type of
I think you
thing.
need a minimum too.
Well, you
because
have
don't
you
wanna-
have to have a minimum. And Travis, I think Travis understood what I was trying to say. There's sometimes in job descriptions you don't add preferred because it can cause other issues if you have preferred and you go through a ranking system. But you do need at least a minimum. So my suggestion might be something, a minimum of bachelor's degree and 6 years, or 10 years, or a master's in public administration and 4 years. Like, to add that as an additional minimum qualification
It
might
just
make that.
feels like you get so specific. What if they have a master's in this that really was you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was
So
actually
we can
thinking.
say related.
I was actually thinking a little bit the opposite way, and I apologize, I missed the last meeting, but I watched the public meeting that was there. I missed whatever discussion happened, closed doors. So I was looking forward to getting updated on some of that. But in looking at that and reading all this, as far as this part goes, the minimum qualifications, I think, I agree, I think you need a minimum. You need to have a bachelor's degree. I like the bachelor's degree in public administration, what's written there, and the 6 years. And then the or. The or was where I was actually thinking almost the opposite, because I don't want to narrow it down to just people who have been city managers. Like I can tell you there are plenty of executives that would love to make the jump over to something that's a little more secure in these times and has benefits and all those sorts of things. And there might be some really good people that especially a headhunter will go after. So I don't want to just limit the or to 10 years experience with city government, but say a bachelor's degree and comparable, 10 years comparable experience.
So that's the place you could be more flexible, because you couldn't.
I don't want to
wouldn't
limit
say
it just to people who
preferred.
have
You'd
worked
to
in
say
government.
Minimum qualifications, but then down here you could add the flexibility in.
I think we got to be real careful if we, and I'm absolutely open to looking at the private sector. I think you got to be real careful when you open it up to the private sector that it doesn't just become about,
Well, we're the ones that get to make the decision, right?
yeah, but there's usually a process that goes through to get there. I'm just saying we got to be careful if we do that. Like, and I'm okay with it. I would just like our HR representative to massage that fully before that gets thrown into the job description or the qualifications for the job description, because if you're looking for somebody that's coming from private sector, you want somebody who has experience managing an organization of at least $40 million and and 250 employees underneath them and all
Well,
those
you have
kind of things.
that word comparable experience, right? It basically, it broadly covers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to opening that up. For me, the only thing is that helping those people understand that, private business finance is very different than government finance.
There's, as you've experienced though, there's tons of businesses that work primarily with government
true.
agencies,
Very true.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, we've seen our people go to private business, that door swings the other way a lot.
Absolutely.
So they're usually
So I just
still
don't,
there to
I,
make more money.
I won't, I'm not saying that we're more likely to find someone there, I'm saying we shouldn't exclude.
I totally agree with you.
And then back to my comment about you, I don't know why this keeps bothering me, but it bothers me when I read the walking, da-da-da-da-da. Is there an easier way to put that they have to be, sorry.
Which one are you talking about?
It's just, oh, okay, perfect.
So we did make the change. We wanted to make sure that we focused on the Americans with Disabilities Act and
Yeah.
say, hey,
Can you
these are
specify
initially
what
what we
we're referring to?
expect,
Walking stands.
but we can make
sweeping
reasonable
city.
accommodations to anybody to get around some of those
That was the only thing
situations.
that was concerning to me. It
So-
was like, I
so-
don't want it to be exclusive of people who maybe
To
can't
be
walk.
fair, that is actually really common language.
For sure.
So-
I read it on a document I just was given just the other day, for sure, as part of the job description currently, but it just concerned me a little bit, just feel like it could be massaged a little bit.
That's where I look to our professionals,
Yeah,
make sure we have all the right language in there.
Exactly, felt more inclusive.
And on very bright side, when we get applications and we can't tell, right, what
Exactly.
a candidate's able and maybe not able to do physically, and I think that's a big win, that we can bring people in without necessarily physically seeing them, and I
Yeah.
think that keeps it a
I
little bit more
appreciate
equal.
that.
Isn't it fairly standard too, in any application process to have a disclaimer in there about making reasonable accommodations?
City
It's
may
on
make
there.
reasonable accommodations to the work environment and duties for those who qualify under the American with Disabilities
Yeah.
Act.
It is.
Yeah.
I obviously overlooked it, but not the one I was looking for.
Job descriptions are
All the
entertaining.
job descriptions I have to create, have to have that in there. so.
Would this be appropriate time to have a conversation about any specific line items in here?
Yes, please.
Okay. A few things in here that jumped out at me that I wanted to make points of discussion. I won't go in order here, but if you go down, it's like 6 bullet points down where it says, may represent the mayor out of the city as needed and assume such other responsibilities as directed.
I had that one marked too.
Yeah. it
I
should be
I have a
mayor.
concern about that because we have a mayor and we have a mayor pro tem, and I just don't think that the city
think-
manager necessarily there's administrative functions that he's fully authorized to do, but there are legislative functions that the mayor or the mayor pro tem have the responsibility to do that should not be delegated to city administration. So
I totally agree with that. I think this is meant more for a strong mayor form of government, right? Where the
Yeah.
mayor has explicit powers and authorities that he could
ribbon cutting.
say do it. But
Yeah.
in our form of government, that doesn't exist. It's the council.
right.
So I'm leaning towards just getting rid of it, or would you like to massage the wording of it?
I think you almost get rid of it.
I think you guys
Strike
are,
it.
because they wouldn't be representing the mayor, they'd be representing the council.
And he wouldn't really be representing council, be representing the city anyways.
Right.
As the
Yeah,
city
and
manager.
that's what I was thinking is that really kind of defeats the purpose of our
Yeah.
form of a
And
council.
if there was a
and city
specific
manager.
instance that he needed to represent the city, he'd be appointed to whatever board or committee or whatever needed
And
to
that
happen.
would be done by the council.
And that'd be done by the
anyways,
council
so-
by resolution.
Yeah, I would.
He or she.
Hold on.
He or she, sorry. He or she, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, even the amendment.
That candidate.
When I grew up, he was the gender neutral pronoun, so I apologize.
They may be appointed. We have been thoroughly chastised, thank you, for making sure we are doing this appropriately. They.
Did you have
Speaking of
others?
which, I noticed
Yeah,
that.
A couple other items, going up to the near the top of this list, where it says coordinates the operations of city departments in accomplishing city objectives, plans, and policies, I'm comfortable with. And the next one, it says provides leadership in the long and short-term goals of the city, is where I think that there may be a potential issue, is that,
Did you say provides management?
yeah, and I'm not even necessarily, I don't want to be overly dogmatic about the word leadership, but there's an issue here that I think is that the issue of who sets the short and long-term goals of the city.
Should it not say leadership to staff, to city staff?
I actually, to your point, Steve, that's actually how I read it, is that the leadership is the operative word without saying that they are setting the long terms. I think you may be able to change that to, provides leadership to accomplish.
Yeah, And again, I'm being,
That's.
No,
I don't want to be overly
you're right.
dogmatic. I'm just expressing that when I read it, some questions came up that I'm trying to
No, I think that's
have
great.
a
I like
discussion.
that to accomplish, that's
Yeah,
great.
I think you're totally on point, Steve. I mean, I actually wrote at the top of kind of those bullet points that really that those things need to come under the umbrella of carrying out the direction and policy of the council, right? Like at the core of it, the city manager's job is to carry out the policy set forth by council and make sure that things run.
So let me,
That's really it. So it's not his or her purview to determine and lead on what long and short-term goals are, right? Or decide making decisions.
Well, and there's-
To carry out policy and decisions that this body makes and to make sure that the city operates properly.
is
To
there,
be fair, though, there are short and long-term goals inside of the administration that are appropriate that they should be providing leadership on, right?
is there a way for us to
That's different than
say
the
something
city.
along the lines of, to carry out the roles and, or whatever, blah, 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 back from the city council, and then make subpoints that would include a lot of these things, so that a lot of these things are clearly under the direction of the council as subpoints?
Well, there's that catch-all, what does it say? Other duties and
duties
assignments
assigned.
of the city might.
Well, what
the
I'm
council might
saying
assign,
is, the vast majority of these things fall under, so provide leadership in long and short-term goals. If that was a subpoint of follow the direction of the city council by providing leadership for short and long-term goals, like as subpoints of that one, I think it might clarify where those roles actually fall. That might be something that we can that you can massage to make it more clear that the intent here is that you are the administration, but you are administrating based on this body's direction.
Yeah, that's a good insight. What I'd probably do, if you're okay with it, is just put under the general purpose and say all these essential duties fall underneath that general purpose, right?
That's what I was thinking, is that some of these maybe just don't need to be listed. They all kind of fall under that general description of what the manager does.
And maybe
right?
that would be the appropriate place, is to expand that general purpose a little bit to include the role in administering council decisions and goals and vision, right? I mean, and that, again, we're being overly dogmatic about something here, right? But I think it's important to have clarity in that in the job description, so that somebody comes in and doesn't feel like, oh, great, I get to make all the decisions or everything, and it's my way, and we want somebody who's going to be more accommodating to following the will of the council.
Well, and I think one of the things that was made very clear was we want somebody who is going to follow the direction of this body. And so anything we can do now to make sure that is more than abundantly clear, so there's no confusion during the beginning of the process, will save us a lot of time and effort later on in the process.
And maybe it's a lot like you were talking, Jared, maybe this was more set up for like a strong mayor form of government, and maybe just look at it through those lenses and say, well, this is this type of government we have, so this is the way it works. Can you put those kind of glasses on?
Would you be so kind to come to a microphone? Thank you. I just don't want Jackie to yell at me. That's all it is.
So if the direction from the council is to proceed with a consulting firm for this hiring process and this recruitment, they will take care of a lot of this for us, right? They'll put together a really glossy brochure with pretty pictures and line out pretty much everything that's here. And so I don't want to get too down into the weeds, right?
exactly.
Because they're going to clean a lot of that up, and they have the experience to do that. So if there's anything that you see that you just do not want, let's strike those so we don't forward those to the consulting firms. Travis, would you agree with that?
I like it.
Because we'll get another crack at this once they've gone through it.
Yeah.
And that's why I was trying to say, these are more discussion level points rather than trying to get dogmatic and
I think that's
specific on the framework here, so.
Nice.
directs, prepares, and administers the annual city budget. Is that truly the role of the city manager, or is that our role as this body to make sure that happens? Chase?
I was listening, the city budget.
Because I don't think that really is, I think we task that to staff, but isn't that ultimately the responsibility of this body to make sure that occurs?
Yes, and by our ordinance, that is something that can be delegated to the city manager and then simply approved by the council. So, and that's true of any legislative function, really.
Sure.
Is any legislative function can be delegated and then just approved by.
My concern is the budget is ours, not the city managers. And so that wording that I hear, direct, prepare, and administer the annual city budget, to me sounds like that's the city manager's budget, and we get to do yes or no, and get to fight with no. It's our budget that he is or she that they are directing, preparing, and administering on our behalf, because
that might be a
I don't want to
place
get, and once again, this goes to a strong mayor type situation. We're not in a city where the mayor dictates the budgets and the council only has a yes or no. We're in a situation where it is our budget and we dictate everything about it. And so I want to make sure.
Well, I think that's where it
here it's
goes
clear.
to basically, under the direction of the city council, these things happen.
I just want to be, that one particularly concerns me because it's the money, it's the purse strings.
No, and I think it's fair, but like I say, I think if you give the general, under the direction of the city council performs these functions, we cover all of that.
Okay.
And to Wendy's point, the recruitment firm will help kind of summarize that and clean this up a little bit. And we don't want to get into the weeds, because technically you could go through every single manager or supervisor's responsibilities and say it's his job to make sure all those are done. I don't think we want to
I'm
get
not
into the
interested
weeds,
in
right?
that.
So
So have we, and please.
I think there's one other issue, if I might, that's not on here, that Wendy just brought to my attention again, is the salary range for this position isn't listed on here, and I think that's something that we need to discuss and set.
So in our,
Would that be true, Wendy?
in our current compensation structure, we have assigned this position a current pay grade.
Yeah, don't we
and
already have that?
range that go along with it.
So we've already done that as part of
Our
what
budget.
we do with our benefits.
Yeah.
When we sign that, do that benefit structure and everything, that all is part of that entire discussion. And so we've already done that for all levels of staff, have we not?
We have.
So
Or do we need a,
what is it?
what's the range?
so it's 134 is the bottom and 201,000 is the top, with the midpoint being 167.
But, and that hits us right in the midpoint of what we talked about before, didn't we talk about that was about, right?
The state's.
Yeah,
midpoint.
I
think
think it's
I'm
fine to
good.
post it that way, and the recruitment firm will give us plenty of feedback on
Yeah.
that, right?
I am too.
If the recruiting firm were to come back and give us direction that needed to be changed, we can obviously
We can
revisit
adjust.
those.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
That's a pretty wide range to curtail to whoever the candidate is, what we feel the qualifications are.
Generally, I'm comfortable with it. I think getting a firm on board is going to help us with that, because they're going to help be able to drive us and at least say, okay, yes, this is an appropriate range, but this is probably generally where you're going to have to be in order to entice the type of person that you want.
So,
So I'd like their input.
City Attorney Andresi, just to make sure that I'm staying within, I'm going to say this the way I'm going to say this intentionally, just make sure if I get off base here. So in regards to a job description, is it the council's direction to staff that we would like to acquire a recruiting agency to help us with a job description, and then possibly and eventually hiring a city manager after the job description? Have I stayed on point here? Am I good?
Yeah, so you could instruct at this time and give staff direction to go out and seek.
That's what
bids.
I'm asking. Can
Yeah,
we give that-
bids from these companies,
have-
and then we
have
would
we-
execute an agreement with them prior to having them go.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we've noticed this properly. I'm not getting off of open meeting stuff, that it's okay for us to start talking about giving staff direction to find a recruiting agency.
Yeah, I think you're fine there.
Okay.
I see no reason to wait.
Clint, do you have any concerns with that? Nope. Sherry?
No,
Steve?
no.
Okay, so the direction we would like to give to staff, and I would like you to repeat this back to us, is that we would like you to find a recruiting agency that would handle this type of, and begin that process. Do you understand what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
Travis, I have, before you
AKA
end it,
headhunter.
I have one more bullet point thing for you on the second page, the last bullet point above minimum qualifications. It says perform other duties as required or assigned by the mayor and/or city council. It should just be and city council, right? Or just city council, not or. There's not one of us that can
Yeah,
give.
it's,
Mayor
yeah,
and-
Good
mayor
catch.
and council.
I think that's great.
So
Youth council are
Clear
freezing
direction.
outside.
You are, can you just repeat back what you're going to do? We want to make sure that we have clear communication as to, we don't want there to be any miscommunication. So what is your plan?
So we will start talking to recruiting agencies, and we will allow you to choose and give some positives and feedbacks behind multiple recruiting agencies. We'll get some costs to go behind it, and then we can make a decision on which agency that we want to use.
I would personally like a recommendation from staff as well as to what the top recommendation is. Not that we will go with it, but what staff's recommendation would be in regards to which agency would be best suited to fill our needs. Okay, any,
Then Travis, you're planning on presenting that on November 5th. Is
It
that
can be ready by
accurate?
November 5th.
You're awesome. Thanks, Travis.
does any of the council have any concerns with the information that was relayed back to us? Beautiful, thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. All right, so that brings us to the end of the city council work meeting. I will accept a motion to adjourn and take a short break for our regular meeting.
So moved.
One moment before we do, just a quick personal privilege, if I might be able to revisit item number 1.2, future agenda items.
No.
Sorry, I was a little bit late, if I
Yeah, you're
might.
fine. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I don't know if this was mentioned or not, but several months ago, we requested an accounting about the
Yes, we did
impact
bring that-
fees.
yep, we've already talked about it.
I'd really like to see that on the agenda.
Yep,
Thank
we're
you.
good.
I actually have one thing I forgot.
Thank you.
The email that was sent, the update email that was sent out recently, which is great. I think it was the first bullet point, talked about instruction that was given to the local lobbyist about where Harriman stands on some of these potential legislative issues. I think this body needs to have a conversation about that. I don't know what direction was given. I don't recall us having a discussion on what our priorities are and how we feel about any of those potential legislative issues.
That's fair.
Agreed.
All right, so with that, I am now going to accept a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second on that motion?
It said that they were.
I second that
informed where the
motion.
city stands.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor?
Just a second, I'm trying to hear the conversation. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm going to ask that we not have the side conversation until after we
Well,
adjourn the
it
meeting.
was germane to the legislative priority,
Right.
so I want to hear it.
It was just stated that the lobbyist was informed of the city's position or the city's, I wrote it down, where the city stands on those issues.
Yeah, so on the PID, so we've talked about where you stand on that PID.
Okay.
So if you're for the PID, in the way that the cities will not have any control, then I can change that. But we were pretty sure that on the PID, you had all stated that
city
you're
should
not
have
for
control.
PID, so I don't think that you'd want legislation that states that the city should have no
You're
say.
correct on that.
So-
There were just several things
And then they
listed.
have to, they need to watch all of the others. Plus, we talked about some of those in the previous meeting. And then I asked you all for your input for the federal lobbyist, so I need those comments back as well. So that we can get her going on
So
those,
there's
because
a-
they've already started in DC.
There is a motion and a second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We are adjourned. That was a future agenda.
I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations.
light of our earlier conversation?
Just waiting for the nod from Jackie. Okay. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody out to our Harriman City Council meeting for Wednesday, October 28th, 2020. We are getting a little bit of a late start. Part of that is because we just had the opportunity to see the appointment of our 2020-2021 Harriman Youth Council, many of which have decided to have joined us inside. We will start our meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance, which will be offered by Alexander Hill.
Please stand. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you kindly for your participation. We appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and start with City Council. Actually, we're going to take a moment and go slightly out of order. I'm going to, what? I need a motion to reorder the agenda for a report from our police chief.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're going to go ahead and invite our police chief to come up to discuss the incident from last night.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As most of you are aware, last night before midnight, so October 27th, right around 10 p.m., our officers were faced with a perilous situation. We responded on a protective order violation, which isn't terribly unusual. However, qualifying calls came in that said there were shots fired. So as our officers came into the area, they too were hearing shots fired. We think on the order of many. To be honest with you, that's how we located them, is our officers started driving around trying to fire the gunfire. We had many witnesses in that area. Just so you're all aware, it was on the 5300 West block of Solifax. So as the officers came into the area, witnesses from their homes and balconies were pointing out where the subject had last been seen. As it turns out, it was very fortunate. And the reason it was very fortunate is at the end point where the subject had taken up a position could have been very hazardous for our officers. There was a threat that they encountered, an engagement was made, and the subject is deceased. 2 of our officers are on administrative leave. There were a total of 4 more that were witness officers. We had a lot of help from South Jordan and Riverton, city police coming this way. I was outside helping my neighbor at about 10:30 and heard the sirens coming from all over the valley. And there were many police departments that were headed that way. We were able to thank them and cancel their response before they made it up there. However, South Jordan and Riverton stayed on scene because at that time of night we have about 8 officers on. 7 of those were involved in the incident, which isn't unusual. That happens. So we had 1 officer that was free. South Jordan and Riverton both sent cars up to help handle calls throughout the night. As you know, these are very lengthy operations, and our officers were taken offline for the entirety of the night because they have to go through the protocol system. As an explanation of the protocol system for our residents, I am by statute required to notify the district attorney of a OICI, which is an officer involved critical incident. Beyond that, we are, and through the interlocal that you all agreed to, we are part of the Salt Lake County interlocal protocol team. What that means is our agency doesn't investigate our own shootings. Another agency does, and actually it's a culmination of many agencies. You would know them from previous issues as like the UPD or West Valley team. We no longer call them that. They're team 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the reason that is because it isn't true that UPD is the only, or West Valley is the only agency that would come out and investigate it. It's a culmination of teams. We, as Harriman City, if we go and assist another agency, we're part of team 1, which is housed at Salt Lake City. So we're part of that team. Last night that team was activated. The protocol by statute is enacted by me. The district attorney and I have to agree on the team. And as the interlocal states, it's a rotation. That team came out and took over the investigation. And I'm sure you saw in the news all the vehicles and all the light systems and stuff out there. We don't really know the extent to which the crime scene encompasses. The reason I say that is because we don't know where he was when it all began right now. We do believe we'll get calls for the next several weeks indicating where there might be holes. We don't know where he shot. Part of our concern when these types of situations happen is to make sure that we get out and try and locate any other individuals that may be hurt, even by a random gunfire that we've all seen in other cities that go through houses and hurt or kill people. We did our best attempt in the darkness. South Jordan sent, I believe, a team of 5 out through our neighborhoods, as did Riverton, to try and locate what we could locate. But as it stands right now, the scene where the engagement took place was the scene that they processed. Our officers, both of them that are on administrative leave, are doing well. And our witness officers, the other 4 that I indicated, are also doing well and back to work. So can I answer any questions?
I would just caution the council members, if they have questions, to be limited as the investigation is still in process, but please, if you have any questions.
No questions, just thank you all. guys are
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah, no question, just a comment, and really what Councilman Henderson said is, you know, please pass on our thanks to the officers for a job well done in very difficult circumstances. I think it's very, I don't think there's any way for any member of our community to actually understand what they experienced last night. And, but the fact that they did and they're willing to do it without hesitation for the safety of our community is quite unbelievable, to be honest. So please pass on our thanks.
I will, and it's certainly, as we all know, law enforcement, public safety is a dangerous, risky career. Our officers, I say it again and again, they're willing to run into the face of danger without any concern for themselves, right? It is for our public. I would like to tell you that the outreach to us, and Tammy was up late last night working with Cody and Zach through the press release process. The outreach has been phenomenal. Our rooms are full of people bringing in, you know, treats and anything they can. So it certainly is touching and quite honestly emotional to work in a city like Harriman, where your citizens, and it doesn't happen in other places, where your citizens stand up behind you, right? You know, they're the ones that hold us up. And Mayor, if I might, we do have an update on the critical incident. We have released his name to the media. It's Isaac Lemoyne Christensen, age 38, and he is of Salt Lake City. He's not a resident of Harriman. However, the protective order was against, or was in favor of one of our residents. So that you all know, well, you all know, and so that our residents all know, our officers that are in uniform and in marked cars all wear body cameras. It's mandatory, and to me, I believe it's that transparency piece. There is video of the incident. However, we are the holder of that record. We will not be releasing that evidence. That goes to the district attorney's office through the protocol team. So these videos we turned over to protocol, and that will ultimately go to the DA. We expect that there will be, the investigations are lengthy, and we don't expect it to hit the DA for a little bit. So we'll hang in there. I will keep you all very well advised of our officers and their conditions, but as of right now, they're doing very well.
Chief, I feel compelled to state that I know that this entire body and all members of our police department value the life of each and every individual. I know that I do not believe that there is a single officer out there that would take the choice that was made to engage in lethal force without anything but the utmost of seriousness and doing everything they can to avoid it. And I want to make sure that I express to our residents that I'm grateful that our officers have that restraint when needed, but that also have the capability to protect our residents when needed as well. And so while regardless of the choices by the individual that is no longer with us, I'm glad that our officers are safe and that they were able to go home at the end of the night, because ultimately our residents and our department is what we're here for, is to protect. And I'm extremely grateful that they did that last night, even though it resulted in a fatality.
Thank you. And you're right.
I just have one comment a couple of comments too. I'm grateful first of all to all of you. I would ask, well, I've already asked you to please pass that along, but please also pass along my thanks to the other cities who were step up and come to respond to a neighbor. So appreciative of that, and really so appreciative of a mutual respect between our residents and our police department. There's many cities across our country right now who are lacking that, and these incidents turn into riots and looting and things of that nature, which is super unfortunate in my opinion. So thank you, I'm grateful for that, and thank you to our residents who are supportive and respectful of what you guys do.
And thank you. So that you all know, it's very common for my officers to say that they're very fortunate to work here because the council, and this doesn't happen in other cities, stands up and supports them. And when we send them into situations that are so harrowing and perilous for them, and they may never go back to see their families again, right, when they leave to go to work, it's good to know that the legislative body stands up and is not afraid to say, we support you, we love you, keep our community safe, and go home. Make sure you make it home to your family.
Thank you, Chief.
There's been a lot of, 2020's been one of those years, huh?
Keeps on giving.
We've had some interesting conversations and situations regarding our Harriman Police this year. I can say thank you, and I don't know that articulates it. I don't know what else to say. The fact that there was somebody who was threatening the safety of our community, and our officers ran into the face of danger, put their lives at risk so that the rest of our community could be safe. And although I know there's none of them that wanted to be in a gunfight, they don't want to be in a situation where their lives are at risk or they're putting other people's lives at risk. I'm grateful that they were there and that I have all the confidence in the world that they took the appropriate level of action to end the threat to the community. I don't know what to say, but God bless those officers for their actions last night. Bless the chief for training them so well and for having such a good team, and we thank you for all that you do for our city, and please keep up the good work because it keeps us safe at night. Thank you.
We will for sure, and you all should know that we have employed the finest police department, in my opinion, in the United States. Our guys are not, they don't like to go out and have to do that. Nobody does. It's just, it doesn't matter what city you work in, you never want that to happen. It's the most horrifying moment of your life. However, when you have a community that you're sworn to protect, you need to do that. And they did, and they carried out those orders. But you should all know that they are one of the most well-trained. They certainly are the most community-oriented. These guys and gals we have just love this city, as do I. So it is our honor to serve this city, and our officers will continue to do it with distinction and honor themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind our residents that while we appreciate your participation in assisting our officers, that your safety comes first as well. So if you ever find yourself in a dangerous situation, please feel free to rely on the resources that our community has provided for you. Let our officers do their job, and make sure that you keep yourself and your family safe first before you step into a situation where it would be better suited to have our officers address it. With that, we will move on to 5.2, which is City Council comments and recognitions.
If I may, I'd like to read a portion from a letter that a resident sent to me. It says, Mr. Shields, I'm a Harriman resident located in District 4, and I just wanted to pay a compliment to Wendy Thomas as the interim city manager. I came to her with a concern that I have been trying to get an answer from the city staff on for several months. It's not a straightforward issue that is easy to resolve. However, she immediately responded back to an email I sent her on a weekend, and she said she'd get back to me right away after discussing with staff. She did, and provided some background information that was very helpful. She also offered a meeting with her staff to discuss potential solutions. Although the outcome of my concern is still unknown, regardless, I felt compelled to extend my thanks to her and all the city staff to take time out of their busy days to pay attention to my concerns. They didn't have to, although I may be annoyingly persistent. Bottom line is, she is looking out for the city and its residents, and I thought you should know. Although I don't know Wendy personally and have only had a few interactions, I know she would listen to citizen concerns and respond in a respectful, professional manner, which ultimately keeps phone calls from coming to the city council members like yourself. Great job, Wendy. Great job, staff. I just wanted you guys all to hear that. It makes a huge difference to our residents when you guys take the time to do what you do every day. So thank you for that. One other thing I'd like to bring acknowledgement to, I saw on social media a graphic that the city produced on the fire service area changes. I thought that was excellent, very well done. I guess we have an award-winning public information officer for a reason. That was great stuff, guys. I think it really is important. Again, I want to reiterate, we have said it over and over and over again, that there is a new tax, but it will be replacing an old tax. There is not a tax increase on the residents of Harriman for the fire service. If there's any questions about that, feel free to call me. I'd be happy to explain it to you.
Or staff.
Call staff. They probably know it better than me.
But they can probably explain it better than we can.
And then one other thing, in reference to the report that was made this evening on the police department incident, I think it serves as a great example to the rest of our country right now in these tense times when our police officers are put under a level of scrutiny and attention that they probably never have felt before. To hear and see the comments from our residents in support of our police officers, to know that our police officers conducted themselves with professionalism, with restraint. I hope that other communities and municipalities around the country could learn something from this, to understand the benefit of having this community-oriented policing model that we've implemented, the value and the confidence that that produces for our residents, the interactions, the positive interactions between our police department and our city are invaluable to making sure when there's something that's going down, you have people lining the street pointing you to where to go.
From a safe distance, not putting themselves in
From a
danger.
safe distance, please. I just want to make a special acknowledgement of how this should be an example to all of our communities about how to deal with these things. There's a process that it goes through. There's protocols in place. It will be reviewed. It will be investigated. It will all come out in the wash. There's no rush to judgment. There's no rioting. There's no looting. There's no burning. There's no breaking anything in our city. There is a patient understanding that we have great police force, and we're going to let the process work out and prove that we have a great police force. So thank you for all that you do. I'm proud of our city, our police force, and our residents for how they've handled this situation.
All right, we will move on to item 6, which is public comment. Audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the city council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda-and-minutes, where they will be linked, there'll be a link to join the electronic meeting to submit a comment. Your statement will then be read into the public record. At this time, I will open the public comment to those here in the audience. If there's anybody that would like to make a comment at this time, please come to the podium. Seeing none, I will turn to our recorder to see if we have any electronic. As we have no electronic, at this time, we will close the public comment portion of our meeting. We'll move on to item 7, which is City Council Board and Committee Reports.
I have a couple, Mayor. First of all, just a big thank you to the youth that were here tonight. As the mayor mentioned previously, we were a little late getting started because our youth council was being sworn into taking their oath of office. These are exceptional youth in our community. I think our community is full of exceptional youth, but these are exceptional youth. So I'm grateful for their participation in youth council. I guess to illustrate that, during their fall break, where kids might just be hanging out, playing video games. I don't know what all kids do nowadays, but these kids were doing service in our community. They were going around and cleaning up trails and parks and all kinds of service opportunities throughout the week that they were on fall break. Exceptional youth, and I'm super grateful for them, their willingness to serve our community and be example to the other youth and quite frankly, every resident of our community. So thank you. I'm grateful to be able to associate with them. And then the Wilfred, the garbage board, we passed a preliminary budget at our last meeting. Our finalization of the budget meeting will be on November 16th at 6 p.m. That will be a public hearing at the Salt Lake County Public Works Building on 604 West, 6960 South in Midvale. So if anybody would like to participate in that public hearing, that is when the budget will be tentatively approved. Well, we have a tentative budget. There's a possible that we would approve the budget that night. Part of that budget this year will be the change in the area cleanup. You'll notice that we had COVID kind of dictated the changes of it this year because of the desire to not to have the garbage people out manually picking up garbage and being exposed to it. So we changed the area cleanup to where people could rent their trailers and they would be placed in your driveway and things like that. All of the feedback we've gotten have been very positive. But most of the feedback we've gotten are from people who actually utilized it. So there might be some feedback of people who didn't utilize it, that didn't like it. So we'll be taking that into consideration. But it was a significant cost savings to the district to change the area cleanup and do it that way. And so the budgetary decision was made to move forward that way. We have significantly less full-time drivers that have to be employed during that time. So the decision was made to move forward with that type of area cleanup. That will be part of a budget discussion. And so if anybody in our community that has issues with that and like to share that with the board, that would be the day to show up November 16th and provide your public comments on that.
I have several.
Go for it.
I'll be quick because several of the meetings really had contiguous conversations within them of the matter. So I'll start out first with talking about the Utah League of Cities and Towns. We had our board of directors meeting last Monday. And then also last week we had Wasatch Front Regional Council. And I will tell you that the bulk of both of those meetings was focused on, as I gave you an update at our last council meeting, the current status of the CARES Act funding and how that's being spent both locally throughout the state and within the county. There have been no changes in terms of, what has the first and second distribution that we have received in the city here from Salt Lake County. There's been continuing conversations that have been going on at the county level from the league, encouraging additional disbursements to the cities. I will tell you that one of the arguments that may be being used as to why they are not is that cities, at least to this point, haven't reported having spent all of the money that they've been allocated. And so I know Tammy gave us a great thorough update last meeting of the additional programs that we're looking to put in place here. And they are reporting that back to the county to see the needs that we have to where we are, have a plan to use the money that has been allocated to us. But we'll continue to have those discussions at the county level from both of those bodies, the league and Wasatch Front Regional Council, and keep everyone updated on the CARES Act spending here locally. Additional to that was obviously starting to look ahead at the upcoming legislative session, those issues that, or bills that are starting to present themselves in some of the committee meetings. Again, mentioned earlier, one of those was surrounding PIDs, so we'll keep an eye on that. There has, just because of the current conditions, still being in the middle of the pandemic, I know that it was communicated to us that there's been at least an ask by the leadership in the House and the Senate to try and keep their bill load a little lighter this year because they recognize that we're probably still going to be dealing with some challenges once the legislative session starts, and what that means as far as really ability to have a lot of people. They're not even sure at this point, obviously, if them as a body will be able to meet up there, if their meetings will have to be held remotely. So we'll see how that plays out.
I say they just take the year off.
Yeah, it'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would really help all of us
Yeah,
out.
for sure.
Quit messing with things.
For sure. So, those are the main issues, again, that are really being talked about at both levels at the board and, at the league and Wasatch Front Regional Council. We also had Conference of Mayors meeting last week, a good meeting with all of the local mayors, and a lot of the discussion there, again, focused around CARES Act funding. I had a great opportunity to talk about the Harriman Bucks program. There was a lot of questions from the other communities as they've heard about that, and again, as they're looking at ways to spend their CARES Act funding and not really be penalized for not spending it. So had a great opportunity to share our experiences here and how we are just getting ready to roll out the third round of doing that in our community. And there was a lot of very positive comments given as a result.
If you don't mind me asking, how are we, if I, not too off topic, how are we coming on that last round? Nice.
Excellent. Another conversation that was had during COM that kind of turned into a lengthy is one of the mayors asked about each city's experience as it relates to, great tie into what we talked about here earlier, our local police agencies, and do we have advisory boards in place? Do we not have advisory boards in place? What's our experience with those? And, you know, is there a sentiment or in any of our local communities that are going along with the whole push for, you know, police reform or the defunding of the police? And, you know, happy to report that really in Salt Lake County, there's very minimal calls really outside of some of the stuff that we've seen down in Salt Lake City of those types of actions of our public that are calling for defunding or significant reform. What I was, again, able to talk about and a little bit brag about, and I was feverishly texting a few of the staff here to make sure I didn't misspeak during that meeting, was about, obviously, our citizen advisory board that has been put in place since day one from the creation of our police department, and what a benefit that has been to our community, and really how I think that is translated into, as was reported tonight, such strong support and care for our local officers here. And like I say, just kudos to Chief Carr and to all of his staff for having the foresight to make that a part of the department from the start, because I think it really has set a great tone for our community and helped us to move really rapidly beyond a lot of this other rhetoric that is taking place out there. So again, for COM for me was a chance to kind of boast about the good things that are happening out in Harriman. The last thing I'll report on is the South Valley Sewer Board. That meeting was just held yesterday morning. Like Sherry mentioned, we are going through the budget process in that entity as well. We did adopt a tentative budget. That final hearing, hearing on the budget is set for November the 24th. That will be put out, most likely that'll be done remotely as well to allow everyone to participate. And that will happen at 6 p.m. on the 24th. I will tell you that the budget is essentially a flat budget from last year to this year as it relates to the sewer district, with no proposed increases to service fees or anything else in there. I will tell you that having sat on that board for a couple of years now, that I am very impressed with the fiscal responsibility of that organization and how it's run, and the way that they are able to really save and plan ahead. They have several large capital improvement projects that are set for next year and that begin next year and then continue on for the next several years, and that is really to prolong the life of the over 1,000 miles of sewer pipe that are in the ground. And all of that right now is fully funded ahead of those projects even kicking off. So a tremendous staff down there that does a great job being able to look ahead and keep that organization running very well. The plant down there, I think it reported last time, is basically running at capacity. And they are still diverting some flows to Jordan Basin as well. And so really, as we start to look ahead, we're probably about 5 to 7 years out before they anticipate having to go out for that next bond and start to plan for the second phase of expansion of that facility down there to double the flows that they're able to handle. So great organizations that we're able to work on, and I'm able to be part of as a part of the responsibilities here. So thanks. I know that was lengthy. I'm done.
You said it was gonna be quick.
Trust me, that was very quick compared to the meetings.
I have two really quick things. UFSA board approved unanimously our request to form our new taxing district early, so we checked that one off. Sounds like the agreement is, I'm looking for Chase, is near. Is it?
Last I heard from UFSA's council, they were just finalizing that and would be sending it out.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just finalizing the wording. We'll send it back to us and we're good there. And then Southwest Study, focusing on kind of the reboot and focusing on transportation. I just got a notice we'll be meeting on that again the end of November, hopefully get that kicked off. Also focusing on the legislative session to hopefully get some state money.
All right, thank you. We will move on to item 8, which is reports and presentations. 8.1, Victim Associate Service Report by Christy Morgan, our Victim Service Coordinator. Chief, would you mind introducing?
Christy.
Please.
I'm going to ask for that privilege because Christy will not introduce herself very well, and we should know how awesome she is.
She is amazing, guys.
She is amazing. As you indicated earlier, when we created the police department, we created a citizens advisory board, but we didn't stop there. We created, Christy, if you come up, please. We created a victim services unit that I believe, again, is second to none. We have the best victim services unit in the state, if not the region, and that's because of Christy and her team that she puts together. Over my 3 decades of law enforcement experience, one of those stops that I made along my way was to be over one of the larger victim services unit in the state of Utah, and that was with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office at the time. I was over 9 victim services personnel, and it was at a very expansive unit, and I can tell you right now that we couldn't pull off what Christy does. So it's with my pleasure and my honor to introduce Christy Morgan to you. You all know that she does this twice a year as part of our funding agreement with the feds, and wait till you're here tonight. Thank you, Christy.
It's one of my favorite presentations, Chief.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to present for you tonight. As Chief Carr mentioned, our Victim Services Program receives federal grant dollars through the Victims of Crime Act that is received in the form of a pass-through grant that's administered by the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. And one of the requirements is that we meet and chat twice a year so that you can get a good idea of what we have been up to and what our services are looking like. So I will see you again in about 6 months, but for tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about just a brief overview of the Victim Services Program, some of the statistics that we have compiled over the last 6 to 9 months. And then I thought I'd give a little snapshot of domestic violence. One of the most common questions that I receive during the time of COVID is domestic violence increasing? That's probably the most common question that I get asked. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about the types of domestic violence calls, and then a comparison of domestic violence calls from last year to this year, so you can kind of see what it looks like. So this is kind of an overview of what we've been up to since January. We have served 302 victims. As you can see, a slightly more majority is female, We've provided information and referrals for service 772 times in those 9 months. You can see from the pie chart that the little more than half of our victims are domestic or family violence. And then the other major categories are in there. We do serve victims of other crimes, but it's sort of our major categories. You can see.
What percentage of those served are children or youth?
I don't have those statistics with me at the moment,
That's all right.
so.
I know there's a fair amount, so.
Yes. So we also consider children who are present during a domestic violence incident as a victim of a crime. So that would be encapsulated in those numbers as well. So you can see in the first year that we were a police department, from October of 2018 to September of 2019, we served 123 victims of domestic violence. In the last 6 months, we've served 137. That number maybe looks like we are doubling our rate of domestic violence. And while the number of domestic violence incidents has increased, this also reflects COVID's impact in sort of a slowing in the court system, right? I might have a victim on my caseload for a shorter period of time if their case is able to go through the court system more quickly, but because of delays, they stay on there for a lot longer. So I have some that are on this caseload for a lot longer period of time. So that's part of the reason that number has increased so much in the last six months.
Probably a lot more people at home too, right?
Yes, a lot of people at home. So there's two major categories of domestic violence calls. There's the criminal. That would include things like assault, threats, property damage, unlawful detention, meaning someone wants to leave and they won't let them leave, that type of thing. When we get this type of call, what usually goes on is there's an investigation, officers collect evidence. We perform a lethality assessment, which is a series of questions that has a great deal of research behind it that give us a good indication of people who are at higher risk. So if they answer these questions in the affirmative, a certain number of affirmative answers puts them in a higher risk category. That gives us an opportunity to seek pretrial protective orders, to talk to the victim about their danger level, that type of thing. Often these cases are sent for screening through either our Harriman City prosecutor or the district attorney, going through the criminal justice process, and me, victim advocacy, where I will help them through that criminal justice process and connect them with the services and resources that they need. There's also non-criminal, and those would involve verbal arguments, civil questions. Sometimes people are going through a divorce and have questions about property or what they can do. Sometimes those involve just a police presence to keep the peace, right? Maybe they feel like things are escalating and they're nervous that it might turn into a criminal situation, and they call police to come and keep the peace. And so a lot of times what we end up doing in those situations is just educate. We talk to people about what domestic violence looks like, the impacts on the children, separating parties for the night so that it doesn't become a criminal offense. And in these cases, we review each and every non-criminal case to watch for signs of escalation. A lot of times I will see several non-criminal cases come through before a criminal case comes across my desk. We give out information. We try to connect to resources at that time, right, to try to ever prevent it from becoming criminal. Safety planning, and we just watch for patterns of behavior. So you can see in our graph here, the blue represents criminal cases and the orange is non-criminal. And you can see sort of, typically it's about half and half. In May, we had a little bit more of a non-criminal cases than we had of criminal. But it's important to know that our officers spend just as much time on these non-criminal cases. It takes 2 officers at minimum to respond to these calls, and they do spend a lot of time making sure that people are connected to the resources and services that they need. They'll call me, we talk. Again, they do these educational pieces. So, we have on average, 1 to 2 hours spent on each one of these calls, times 2 to 3 officers, depending on the situation. So you can see that they do, take up quite a bit of time, and our officers are wonderful, and they do such great work with each and every one of these victims. So to look a little bit at what domestic violence and COVID looks like, our blue line on here is last year's numbers. So you can see, it follows a fairly typical trend. We don't have a lot of data because of how new we are, but what other police departments see is, you'll kind of see sort of that downturn in around February and March, and then another down in July during the summertime. The orange represents our time of COVID, and then this blue bar down the middle is our quarantine when we were home. So you can see that during our time of quarantine, they actually kind of went down a bit, which is also something our neighboring cities reported. They saw a decrease in cases while this quarantine was going on. There's a lot of theories about why that is. It'll be interesting to see when research comes out to see what it is. Some of the theories are that they were home. They're home with their abuser. There's no way for them to call. There's no way for them to get away. They're also home with their children. They may not want to go somewhere else. They may not want to go to a shelter because they're afraid of getting ill. Maybe they don't want to go to their parents because they're afraid of spreading illness to their parents. So there's a lot of theories about why that went down, but most of our neighboring cities saw the same trend during the quarantine. Then you can see as the quarantine lifted, we kind of had that spike. And then in the summer, where we typically see a small downtrend, we did not see that this year. We saw rates actually increase where we would normally expect to see sort of that downturn. So that's kind of what it looks like. Again, like I said, it'll be interesting to see when some research kind of comes around about what impact this had on our community. I'm really, really proud to work for Harriman Police Department. We have wonderful officers that we work really well together. They're super receptive to all of the ideas that I bring and the questions that I have. And I live here, my family lives here. It's a great community that I'm really proud to be a part of. I really appreciate our commitment to providing a local connection for our victims. There are often opportunities to resource out, but we have a strong commitment that people who are victims of crime here in Harriman have a local connection that they can talk to, that they can call, and we work in collaboration with our community partners really well. So that's all I have for you tonight, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
No, I just thank you for what you do. I think that oftentimes people who are involved in these situations, especially domestic violence, they just don't know who to turn to until they oftentimes turn back to the abuser, because that's someone they can depend on. They're there, right? Mm-hmm. And so thank you for giving them a healthy avenue to improve their life situation.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your work.
I say this every time, but I'll kind of save my police comments for this portion too, is you guys really do something that I could never do. I think most of us could never do. And that doesn't go for just maybe what the media sees as heroic stuff that we were talking about before, but the things you guys deal with, there's no way I could do that. No way. So thank you very much.
I made a comment that this is one of my favorite presentations, and it's not my favorite because the fact that we need it. It's one of my favorites because we have it. I was particularly happy to see that our youth council was here to hear this presentation tonight. There's a lot more that goes into policing services than just showing up, telling someone to go somewhere else, or putting handcuffs on somebody and being done with it. That's not the end of it, or at least not in our community. And the time and effort that our department and our officers and our staff put in to make sure that our community is cared for, not just policed, but cared for, I think is one of the reasons why we do have one of the best, if not the single best, police department in the country. I'm proud that I was on this board at the time that we made that decision to do that. And I continue to be proud as you guys continue to bring us just amazing presentations of the work you're doing to help our residents. And so I'm grateful for it and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I grew up in a law enforcement family and spent a lot of time in police departments, and I will attest that you all have something special here.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
All right, we will go on to our consent agenda.
And Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Steve, on the consent agenda?
An aye vote, sorry.
Yeah, you vote yes?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
I have to vote no on this one.
Okay.
I'll comment.
And I will vote yes. That motion does pass. I'm going to open it up for comments on votes.
Just real quick, that's not that I disagree with any of the elements, just that I wasn't here for item 9.4 last time, and apparently there was a discussion had in closed door that I haven't been briefed on, and just kind of a matter of principle for me. I don't know what that was yet.
That's fair.
Sure.
All right. I have a question for Councilwoman Orn before we move on to the next item. Do you know if it's a school night tonight?
I just know that I believe that these young men and young women are responsible enough that if they need to leave, they can leave. If they want to stay, they can stay.
Fantastic. Thank you. We're not going to be offended. All right, item 10.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance authorizing a text change proposal based off the application submitted by Judd Messenger on behalf of Academy Village Land Holdings, LLC, and in partnership with John Linsley, requesting the approval of a draft village mixed-use VMU overlay zone to regulate signage within commercial development that contain a minimum of 40 contiguous acres of property. Michael Malloy.
Thank you. The timeline on this project began in January, and we worked with the applicant to make a number of amendments to the proposal. We met in the October 14th work meeting to brief the council on this item. As you can also see from this item, because this is a legislative item, we have received a planning commission recommendation of approval, and I'll talk more about that as part of this presentation. And then tonight, the council has the opportunity to vote on the proposal. Of course, if there is any reason that the council wishes to defer your decision tonight, that's an option. You can approve, modify, or deny the application as well. A map just showing potentially where this overlay may be applied. Again, we're just creating the tool. This is a text amendment. This would require to apply the text amendment if it were adopted by the council. We actually would need to come back before the council and actually do a zoning map amendment. And it is the applicant's intent to apply it to this property that we've sometimes called Pod 35 and 39, Academy Village, between Mountain View and Academy Parkway. Last time we met, there was a question about how the proposed site and the new signs that are being proposed for Mountain View corridor relate to the other signs that we currently have for the Zions Bank Stadium. So these two blue stars are the existing signs and they're in another overlay. It's a sports and entertainment overlay that the city had adopted years ago. And this is approximately the location of the site plan showing the two new Mountain View oriented signs. They're called Plan Center signs in the overlay ordinance that you're looking at tonight. The ordinance limits the number of Plan Center signs to 2. And we included a site plan showing approximately where they'd like to have those located.
How does it limit that? Is it per acre or is it?
It's not per acre. So the whole overlay has to have at least 40 contiguous acres, as we know. And then within that center, you have 40 acres or more. They could have up to 2 signs. There is a proximity requirement that has to be oriented towards the Mountain View corridor.
So my question then goes, let's say that Mountain Point Retail met all the requirements and wanted to do one. would they, would they be allowed 2 as well, if they met all the other requirements as well to put an
Correct.
overlay zone on?
Correct.
So it's not a minute, so what if we had one that was 80 acres? Would they still be only allowed 2?
Yes, the way it's currently written.
Thank you.
Yes. I also put in the staff report some approximate separation or distances between these locations. This is an aerial of the site, the property for reference. And again, this is the site plan, a concept site plan. There's discussion in the overlay to have a master sign plan. And so this would be an exhibit, that the type of plan that we would see in the future as this property is developed, assuming that this text amendment is approved. And again, you can see at the bottom of the screen, these two, the locations of the 2 plan center signs. Now, and I have another graphic that'll show really the reason why this is being proposed. But the main objective here is to have a sign that is tall enough, oriented towards Mountain View, and because of the grade change between Mountain View and the site, as illustrated by this diagram, you can see that even a approximately 50-foot tall sign from Mountain View actually looks like about 35 feet, 36 feet in relationship to the travel way of Mountain View corridor. Now, this is a new slide, and I apologize. I was planning on just presenting this verbally to you tonight, but I thought, okay, I found enough information, maybe it'd be better to just put it in this table. For comparison's sake, you can see in Bluffdale, and not everybody uses the same terminology, and I can't say that these are the exact same scenario, but they're similar. So you can see the scales that our neighboring cities allow for other large commercial centers, primarily oriented towards either Bangerter or I-15 or Mountain View. So Bluffdale allows a freestanding sign with I-15 frontage, 50 feet tall maximum, 300 square feet area. Bluffdale does allow billboards, again, because they have I-15 frontage, and you can see the standards there. We currently have a plan center standard, as long as you have multiple tenants, 16 feet above the surface, and that's the surface of a sidewalk. It says it specifically in the code. Again, we're concerned about making sure we have visibility if there's grade changes, and 200 square feet. Now compare that to the proposal. Now, the proposal, this draft language, does not replace the plan center sign standards. So every other development that still qualifies for a plan center sign, but is outside of this proposed overlay, would still follow that current code. Within the overlay, again, what's being proposed is 50 feet maximum height, maximum area of 800 square feet, and that's a combination of static signs and electronic signs, and that breakdown is in your the draft ordinance. And again, it has this relationship to the Mountain View corridor, the height of the travel way. So a maximum of 45 feet above that surface, but it's a combination of both of those factors. Riverton, the freeway-oriented sign, 50 feet up to a maximum of 950 square feet. Pylon sign out, I received the actual, kind of like a development agreement contract for Mountain View Village, and it said specifically 50 feet for their pylon sign, but it didn't exactly say the square foot for the maximum area, and I apologize, we've all seen it, we've seen that sign that's there. I'm not sure if it's a factor of maybe linear distance and they have an equation somewhere else in their code, or maybe it's in an exhibit that they didn't send me. So I apologize, I don't have that. But typically, a major pylon sign, again, coming back to like what we do in our plan center signs, 25 feet tall, 200 square feet. So you can see that's pretty typical in a lot of their commercial centers, just like what we do here in Harriman. And then South Jordan, they have language dealing with pylon signs with I-15 frontage, 50 feet, 300 square feet in area. And if it's a shared pylon sign, so you have 2 or more properties who are sharing one particular sign, they actually allow 1.5 times bonus, essentially. And so you can see in both height and area. You can go up to 75 feet if it's shared and 450 square feet. So in relationship to our neighboring cities, the proposal is actually fairly common. It's within the range of what we're already seeing in other markets that are trying to orient development or trying to track development along a high traffic corridor. We mentioned in the staff report that one of the concerns from a commission member was this particular image. There was a feeling that maybe there was too much text, it was too busy, maybe not very effective. There was a kind of like a request that there would be a modified approval to limit the number of tenants on a sign like this to 6. That was not supported by the rest of the Planning Commission, and therefore we had I think it was a 5-1 vote, 5-1 recommendation for approval. Again, this is just a concept for reference. So here's that motion from the Planning Commission. Now, the commission also was very concerned about making sure that they had the ability to review the master sign plan. And in your packet, I identified 2 specific ordinances that state that a master sign plan is required, but it doesn't state who reviews or approves that. It just says that the developer has to submit that master sign plan. And then it also states that certain types of signs, like a plan center sign, does require a conditional use approval. Now, the applicant has already anticipated some type of a conditional use process. They haven't paid for the application yet, but they have essentially submitted kind of an incomplete request. We're holding it so that we know that that's their intent. They intend to go back to the Planning Commission again if you approve this ordinance. So to clarify that process, this is some draft language. It's not in the draft ordinance that's before you tonight. I included it in the packet. This is something that could be added to the ordinance if the council would like to. But like I said, I did identify 2 other existing regulations that I think would indicate that we would already be bringing this to the Planning Commission.
Just adding extra language that we don't necessarily need.
This is language that's an option. So if it's the council's pleasure, you could add this into the draft.
But it clarifies, right? It just makes it more clear.
Right,
exactly
just
what
to
the
clarify the
process is.
process.
Clarification language.
Yeah. So again, that's the proposal that's before you tonight. Are there any questions?
I have a couple, but
Okay.
I'm willing to let other people go first. Go ahead. So in section 1015F-8, A2, let me get back to it here. F8A2. Each planned center shall not, each planned center sign shall not be located within 50 feet of a planned residential dwelling and 150 feet of an existing residential dwelling. I look at how close some of those ones down by the stadium are, that we're allowed to be within 50 feet, and that concerns me that that's just a little too close. I would rather see that be 150 feet on planned or existing. If I remember correctly, as I look through this, can you go back to the
Yes.
presentation?
We'll go back to the reference
to the map? I didn't see that this was within, go back, hold on.
This one?
Nope, 2 more, back. There, that one.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, this was not within 150 feet of any of those residential dwellings anyways. Am I correct?
I have not, I mean, again, this is a concept. I haven't applied a scale to this image.
Okay, so
But it would need to move according to that ordinance. It would have to be at least 150 feet away from that.
No, I'd rather see it 150 feet and not just 50 feet on planned or, and like I say, I'm one of 5, so, but that would be a concern that I have. Also if you scroll down to the next page, when it says, in the proposed ordinance, and section B, monument signs, can you help me understand why it's saying you may have up to 7 monument signs? Are those the shorter signs?
So the monument signs you can see are labeled here in the red dots.
And what's the maximum height on the monument sign?
Let's look at that.
Just wanted to make sure I understood that fully.
Yeah, and that is, whoops, not finding the right image. Right here, 72 inches, so 6 feet.
I would like to see is that per code? Do we have that in our code somewhere, what a monument sign can be? Somewhere else? It doesn't have to be in this one, just somewhere else. I just don't want to get in a situation where we have these massive signs and then all of a sudden we have 25-foot monument signs as well. And I'm not saying that this particular developer is in any way intending to do that, rather that this is the code and we should be consistent ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a concern. And then the last concern that I have comes to electronic signage. Electronic display face shall not be, or so it already addresses it already addresses things like it needs to be lower, you know, the brightness needs to be lowered at night. It can't be strobing, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was fine. I know that in the overlay with the sports zone, that only things that were within ownership of, if I'm trying to remember the wording correctly, that the owners, that there was like, the owner had to have a certain percent owned, or whoever owned the property had to have a certain percent ownage in the company that they were displaying on the site.
Right.
So like Real would be fine because they own Real, and then we see Toro up there because they own a percentage of Toro and some of those other things. Personally, I would like to see something similar that would say that there has to be, you know, that the signage is intended to be for those services that are currently in the development or planned on being in the development. I don't want to see ads for third-party companies just coming in and it becoming a billboard. And so that's my concern with that, is simply that I'd like to see some language in there that says, you know, that it's there to advertise for those, or for, you know, something that there's ownership in, and that, you know, something along the lines that keeps it kind of tied to our community, and we're not advertising something that's going to help another community and not our own community. If we're creating this ordinance, that's kind of where I would like to see that.
And that's probably, again, like a clarifying statement. In order to qualify for on-premise advertising, it has to be somebody who's already has a business in this center. But perhaps that's something, like I said, it's just a clarifying statement.
And for me, it's yeah, maybe it's clarifying, but because these, you know, 50-foot above, they come awfully close to start looking like billboards. And so I want to make it very clear, it's not a billboard. It's not an opportunity to just go out and sell ads. This is an opportunity for you to advertise the companies that are here, that we want you to get off a Mountain View corridor, take the exit, come spend your money in our city and at these locations, because that's what this signage is intended to do. And I don't please don't get me wrong, I don't think that the developer requesting this has any intention of doing anything otherwise. Since this is the ordinance, I would prefer that we have that in the code now, so that we don't have issues with it later.
I think you could put, along those lines, I think you could put, to your point, Mike, that, you know, the clarifying language that's to be used for, you know, on-site businesses, and not to be used to sell advertising space for off-site.
Okay.
And that's just under the digital aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think the monument part, you know, it's not going to change. They're not going to sell ad space for something. Well, I think not. Now that I think about it, why not just do it for everything so it doesn't become an issue? Just cover it now. Just all advertising needs to be for on-premise, or however you want to word it. The intent is not to cause problems with this developer, it's to avoid issues in the future.
Okay.
And I would just add my sentiment, talk what David said about the location of the one pillar sign in reference to the residential location on 35 there.
Mm-hmm.
That one seems awful close to the residences there. Where the other one, there's quite a bit of distance from there. It's closer to where they have the parking structure there. So the proposed location for the 1 and the 35 pod, I would suggest needs to be 150 feet away from the residential. So I agree with that.
And as I'm looking at this, to me, it doesn't need to be 150 feet away from the garages. Those garages are not residential units. Those are garage spaces. They're storage spaces. It needs to be 150 feet from the building itself.
Right.
And is it close? And you don't know in this
We don't know,
drive-through, huh?
but
So I don't know quite the scale of
Yeah.
where it all is. So you may not have to move very much or whatever, but.
Yeah. Some of that doesn't bother me as much simply because the sign's gonna come as they'll know it's there.
there's a
as
drop
they
there,
come.
isn't there? What's the drop?
It's a
coming in
huge
after.
drop.
It's a substantial drop.
Yeah.
From the street down to where those.
And it won't, even in this situation, it wouldn't be as bad as what they have over
It's true.
at the stadium.
Like, it's not gonna have the.
But that stadium, there's some awful, I know the planning commission has come back in the past and say, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that. So let's just avoid it in the code altogether.
John will probably remember well that I fought against that pretty vehemently when that came through. I lost.
Now you get another shot at it.
But it sounds like I'm hearing at least 3 of you are saying we need to do a little bit more work. So I'm just looking for a motion or direction or
What would
further
be direction
comment.
at this point is what we would give you is to please bring it back next meeting with those adjustments. I think we're really, really close. I would just like to see those few little tweaks. Does anybody have any further input that they would like to add on this particular ordinance? So our direction to you would be, please make those tweaks, bring it back at the next convenient meeting as appropriate.
I would just like to add that I would like also, I know it's presented tonight, but also incorporated in the clarifying language on the review, on the process. I think that does need to be in there, and I think it does need to go back to the planning commission.
I'm supportive of that.
So this isn't an agenda item that should be continued,
What?
or,
Yeah, we
it
need
should be
motion.
continued by motion.
It does need to be continued by motion. Fantastic. Well, in that case, I'm happy to accept a motion on this item.
Motion to continue item 10.1 to approve the ordinance number 2020-33, authorizing the Land Development Code Amendment to create a village mixed-use overlay zone.
I would second that with the caveat that to be continued to our next meeting so that there's a date on it.
Is the initial motion amended?
So amended.
Second.
Okay. Does this require a roll call?
Second.
The next regular meeting, not the special meeting on the 5th.
Well, they both are.
What date?
Every meeting is
That's a good
special.
question.
Come on, people.
Indefinitely, we'll just pick it.
But I would say without date, at staff's discretion to bring it back as reasonably quickly as possible.
Well, the next appropriate meeting,
I don't know what
As
that means,
decided
but
by
yes.
amended.
Amended. So the motion as it stands is to table it until the next appropriate meeting as determined by staff. Is that correct?
Well
Sure.
said.
Okay, and there was a second, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so I have a motion second. Do I need a roll call or just all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
That was well done.
Woo, that one was fun. All right, we will move on to 10.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution approving and amending requests by John Linsley to the Wasatch South Hills Master Development Agreement.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is, so I'm running it with this, John? Okay. Thank the youth council for sticking around for this one. This is the best one
Oh,
so
you
far.
guys are in for some.
You're in for a treat on this one.
There's some of them that I've seen before, and I know some of them are glutton for punishment.
Okay, so to start off, we'll have a vicinity map.
Thank you.
So I realized as I was looking through this, I didn't label a thing on it. So the blue area is where we're talking. Mountain View Corridor runs through it. The green piece that you can see that's highlighted, that's the RSL complex. So that should kind of give us an idea where we're talking. It's kind of in the southeast corner of the city. And it's those 2 rectangular parcels were the items we just talked about, pods 35 and 39. So that just cut this presentation down like at least 15, 20 minutes.
You have to do better than
You're
that.
gonna,
Blake.
yeah, Mike, you don't get 15 or 20 minutes.
Good. All right, so here's our timeline. April 2016 was the final amendment that we did that I was aware of, where RSL was brought in. There was a piece of RSL, and there were some changes with the land use plan at that time. Fast forward, July 1st was the first time the council and staff discussed this item in a meeting. And then we've had 7 meetings, and this is the 8th meeting since then where we've discussed and we've gotten feedback and went through and answered questions. And so here we are today. We've talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and hopefully it's all been captured adequately through all these documents. And so your packet had a whole bunch of reading in there, and hopefully you had an opportunity to look through the stuff that you thought pertinent to this discussion. So just a key summary of everything. We'll have this slide again at the end so that we can remember what we said we were going to talk about. But the key points are the developer is proposing to add 161 acres, which is equivalent to 731 units. That's 4.5 units the acre. It's a little bit more. It's like 6 units the acre more. They did have some leftover units down in the developed area already, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so some of those units can slide around, and that's what's happened here. That's why it's a slightly bit more, but it's only 6 units. So they've added the 4 properties we've talked about here: the Conkler, Bank of Utah, Pod 35, Pod 39. And we'll get into some detail on that. Technical guidelines for the commercial center, which we just talked about, Pod 35 and 39. There's some modifications to the text. We talked about some infrastructure updates for the master plans, and then all of this wraps into the land use master plan update. With these asks, the city went back and looked at some of the things that we wanted to see changed, and so we made a couple of requests on some changes to the technical guidelines and the residential uses, and some updates to the infrastructure master plans. So this map shows the darker blue are the areas that are being asked or being included into the MDA. So the big area for the south, that's the Bank of Utah and the Conkler property. And that's all residential proposed. And then
Is that the 161, the new?
Part of it, sorry.
Is that the new 161 acres?
It's 110, I think. I think it's, the 161's total, includes all Pod 35, 39, and the Conkler. Let's see, I've got that written here somewhere in really small text. So yeah, the lower piece is 114 acres, and then the upper piece is like 48, 49 acres. So yeah, the other 2 square pieces, they are the Pod 35 and 39. So quickly over the commercial technical guidelines. The previous MDA did not have any commercial property, and so the developer thought it appropriate to add technical guidelines for the commercial development. The technical guidelines spell out certain things within the commercial development. It addresses theming, it addresses, for example, streetlights. It says that the streetlights should be consistent throughout the entire development. And
Is it at least as good as city standard?
I don't think it speaks exactly to that, but to meet all the standards of the electrical code and everything, then yeah, it would match that standard. Just might look different. They might have a brown color instead of a black color.
I don't care about that. I'm talking about things like width and functionality.
Yeah,
But they're
and
gonna
so
be
they
at-
would have to meet the,
They're going to be at least as good as what we would require, because my concern is that we're going to get 10 years down the road, and we're going to be seeing things that we don't want because we had this agreement now. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we have pushed back against some of these agreements in the past. So I'm just trying to confirm that if we're putting in technical guidelines, that they meet what we would require by city code.
I don't.
You may not have the answer right
I
now.
don't have
and
the
that's
answer
okay.
to that right now. I think you
would-
could make a motion, in your motion, you could include that to say that it must meet the strength or something like that, the requirements, like some type of standard, and that the look is more toward the
Yeah,
architectural.
the look,
committee.
fine. I mean, that's on them. It's the the technical issues that I'm concerned about in regards, if we're making an agreement we're gonna have to be held to. I want to make sure that we're getting at least what we would get if we didn't have an agreement.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, so that would be a good thing to add, to just make sure that it would include all the standards that would meet the engineering requirements or something like that of the city standard, Paul. And so, let's see, they talk a little bit about parking, building setbacks. This whole technical guideline was reviewed by the Planning Commission and approved about a year ago. And so if you were to move and approve it tonight, that would adopt it and include it in the MDA. So any changes you can do here, that's totally within the realm of the council's ability here at this point. We'll keep moving along. The proposed text changes. The first one is, it's highlighted in blue here. It says the master developer may request that the city approve density transfers that do not comply with these limitations. So what this is speaking to is if you have two parcels that are the same underlying zone within this MDA, and you have a density of 8.7 units per acre, you can exceed that density in this one parcel by taking it out of this other parcel, as long as the average over both equals 8.7. So you could have 10 over here, but you might be 5.5 over here to make that work. And so they're saying, well, if we have a special extenuating circumstance, we'd have to maybe go outside of that. We want an opportunity to come back and ask for it. And
Sure,
so
they can come back and ask for a change to their MDA.
But with this wording, may request the city approve, who approves it?
Yeah, no.
And so that's where I would recommend in this one, and I've talked to the developer, or the master developer on this one, to add city council. And then that would clarify who they come to. Because Michael and I were both a little concerned about who's city, and so I would like to have that say city council. And I've talked to Chase about that as well. Legal representative for the master developer is also on the meeting listening, so if we want to ask him his thoughts, we could also do that.
In my opinion, that clause is not a winner for me. If they want to come and request something different than what's in the agreement, they can come and request a change to the agreement. They don't need to have a special clause that allows them to just transfer density differently. For me, I've seen these development agreements over the years get manipulated and used and changed, and well, we're just gonna throw this in here, we're gonna use, and I'm not saying it's this developer that does this. And in no way in saying that that has anything to do with this specific developer. But because of what I've seen in the past, I am not comfortable adding a line that says master development may request city-approved density transfer. Because if you want a density transfer that's different than what's in the plan, you need to come back and give us something different. And so if you want something different, we should be getting something out of it, which means that you need to come back and bring the MDA back to us. So that's my 2 cents on that. I would be pretty firm and fast on that. If this clause is in there, I would vote no against this proposed change. That's just my 2 cents.
I think I might be comfortable with it if it had come back to the city council. If the city council had to approve it, and my reasoning is at least what I'm thinking of in that situation is there's potential for abuse, and this body can prevent that, right? Second is there's also the potential to get a better product rather than what we've seen out there with Army barracks, as far as the eye can see, because that's what's allowed. If you're able to get a better product on this side with a little bit higher density and lower density this side, then I can see where that might be beneficial, but I don't want a rubber stamp, right? To have
That's
it be
why I would
abused.
say bring back the entire agreement. It's not, if you want a change in density over what we're agreeing to, bring back the entire agreement. Because what happens when we want to come back and say, well, our city standards have changed because things have changed over the last 20 years, and we want you to upgrade to the current city standards. We can't do that with Rosecrest because they're still approved under something from 2006. And we don't have that option. Every time they come back and they say they want different density, a different place, we don't have any leverage. If so for adding something like that would remove the ability for us to say, oh, you want a change in density? All right, come back and give us something, upgrade to our current standards, something along those lines.
Well, wouldn't we have the opportunity to do that as part of that process? They have to come back to us and we can say.
No, because this specific,
we can say no unless you're
We can say
willing to
no
give us
unless you do
something.
this.
Okay, and maybe this is a question for the attorney. I mean, would we have the ability in if they came back to just request density transfer to even talk about the rest of the agreement? Or would is this limiting us to really just a discussion about density?
It would most likely just be a discussion about density, but it also lacks additional language about the standard for approval or the standard for denial or the potential process for appeal, which you would usually see in a land use decision of this type.
So that
So
sentence is a
the
little.
language isn't incomplete. It's maybe just weaker based upon some of the things that you've recently brought up.
What would your suggestion be to strengthen it?
Identify some standards for approval or denial or an appeal process, if those were some of the things that, as Mayor's mentioned, would be of concern.
But we essentially already have that through our normal legislative process, correct?
Yeah, this looks like an attempt to circumvent the other processes that we already have in place that have all of these contingencies. I don't know why we need to put one in.
That's true.
Is just adding, we'd have to put in special contingencies just for a density issue in this one particular land. I'm not supporting that either, so.
I'm going to ask you to hold your comment unless requested. Just a moment.
I think you're right on that. To Chase's point, without some sort of standard, right? That is what the process is for.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah, I guess because the other process, because my only hesitation is I do like the idea of if it makes sense to move them, it'd be better to have this unit with higher density and these units with way lower density.
I just don't want to get stuck
Just
with
want the
more Army barracks
flexibility of
because
that.
that's what they're allowed to do.
I completely agree with you, and I don't want this to be taken as I'm not willing to consider a density transfer. In my opinion, is we have a process they should go through if that's what they want. And I mean, you have many times yourself said how much you disagree with some of the master development agreements we've had.
Oh, I hate them all.
You know, and so for me, anything we do that adds an extra opportunity to go around the standard, anytime we add an opportunity to go around a standard process that we already have in place is just them getting something they shouldn't need.
I agree.
So it's my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
You can probably keep going.
I'll keep moving on. So I think we've got that one, and maybe we'll hear from someone else in the near future on that, but we'll move on to the next text change. This is one that the city has initiated, and we've talked with the master developer about it. And so this is, you referred to some other development agreements, and this will also be language that we want to look at in those agreements. This language basically states that as development happens, we often see the developer take extra properties and put them under contract, but they don't become the actual owner, but they want to put them in their MDA. So we figured there was some protection here by saying, well, you can add them in, but you don't actually get to have the benefit of the MDA until you prove that you have been conveyed title of that property and you're the owner.
Did the developer have any problem with it?
No.
Okay,
Nope.
good.
This was pretty wide open and clear between both parties. So this one made a lot of sense to the city, to us. And so this is the proposed text change onto the land use amendment, or the land use plan. Okay, the South Hills Boulevard alignment. If you remember, we talked about this a couple months ago. I think it was actually in July. Seems really not very long ago, but it was. And so this one, I kind of highlighted the alignment. When it was originally written, if you remember, the MDA was written in 2009. It was before Mountain View Corridor existed, so they were contemplating Mountain View Corridor not existing and having this road service the development. It's probably it's a good change because we've had a lot of stuff change since then, so it addresses a lot of the things that are different today than they were then.
That's the new one?
This is the new alignment, and it's missing one thing. If you see down on the south end, pod 15, there's a tail of the road that comes out down near pod 15 that connects to the south that we talked about last time.
There's a second connection to Mountain View Corridor down.
To Porter Rock.
It would go to Porter Rockwell and tie in there, yes, that's correct. So that one we talked about, and I think we got direction from the council that night in July, and we went back to the developer, and it was all addressed, so.
Like, can you confirm, if you can go back to that picture one time,
Sure.
where pod 21 connects over to pod 5, we're going across a different piece of land there. Are there easements or agreements in place to build that road connection all the way through that other property?
It's shown on our transportation master plan that was adopted that way, so that this is consistent with that. So I don't know if there's agreements, but as we've shown our master plan, it gives a general 20,000-foot level view, so to say. And so as long as it's close to there, and I think the developer is here, and he may have some more input on that if you'd like.
I suppose that's really up to them, but I wouldn't want to be building homes on a property you couldn't get to.
Yeah.
Well, they're gonna have to have at least 2 exits regardless to meet fire code, right?
I'm just, you know.
I mean,
It's always helicopters.
they won't get occupancy from the fire department if they don't have multiple exits, so.
Yeah, and where this one goes is shown on the master plan, that makes it impact fee eligible, and you collect the impact fees on it. And so most property owners understand they have a road coming through there, and that property with the impact fees can be purchased with the impact fees or corridor preservation funds if we pursue those. And so there's options to get there. And it seems like we're always trying to make a guess, and usually we're right with roads, but sometimes we're a little bit off, but we can usually overcome that, so. Okay. The proposed land use master plan. So what I really want to highlight here, and watch the blue bubble as it comes up.
Ooh, pretty.
Ooh, animation. So that shows the area that's been developed already. So that's all approved. It's mostly built out. There's still some units under construction, but that's done and moved along. And so that represents, let me see, 1,268 units. And so the rest of it that we see is all planned, unplatted property. And so that's picked up in the table in the pink and yellow and orange in the middle part of the table on this exhibit. And so the planned constitutes 1,502 units plus pods 35 and 39's commercial development. So that's just the land use plan that gets rolled into the amendment and becomes the governing document for how the land can be used for residential or commercial uses. The infrastructure master plans, this exhibit is still a working exhibit. We're still trying to get them finalized, but we're close on those. But there's 3 systems that we're looking at getting the master plans finalized for. One's transportation. The main thing on that is South Hills Boulevard, so it's pretty much done. We've got that one at 99%.
With the exception of that piece that needs to go out to Porter Rockwell.
Their plan actually does show that now. I got it the day after I put this out, so I didn't put it in the presentation to the council. And then the storm drain, we're close on that. There's obviously new storm drain standards, so we're looking at how to address those with the state stormwater plan. And then the culinary water master plan, they're working closely with the engineering and water departments to make sure the proposed tanks are shown in the correct locations, and that the system is, servicing the development properly. So it's all underway, and that's stuff that I would hope the staff would be able to have the leeway from the council to get those finalized and put into the amendment at the end, at the last bit of it when it's ready to get finalized. And so the last part is the technical guidelines. These are the items, and I've presented these to the council before. This is just stuff, like I said earlier, the original agreement was written in 2009. And so these are things that we've noticed that have changed. One highlight is house lighting. There was a clause in the technical guidelines before that said they didn't have to put streetlights in if they just had their porch lights on. And so I think that works well in like multifamily, because you can set up the lights close to the street if you're in townhomes, and they can be set up on timers and the HOA can manage them. But in single family, it doesn't work. So we proposed a change in that language to say, let's allow this in multifamily, but not in single family. That's one example. There's some other stuff with
These road cross sections, are those now to city standards?
the public roads, yes, the 50 and the 66 go up to 53 and 68 to be in compliance with our master plan. The private right-of-ways, we don't really have a standard adopted for privates, but
I thought we
we've
were
worked-
working on that.
We're working on it. It's coming. We'll have to ask Jonathan where that's at.
Wendy, can we add that to the task list? Thank you.
I think we're supposed to have a draft from our consultant on that like next week, so.
Thank you, appreciate it. The road standards are the biggest one that I'm concerned about. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, these are mostly just things that we've noticed that are outdated with our current standard, or things that we've seen maybe there are some issues with that we want to just bring into compliance to work better. And that was all included in your packet as well. So, told you to see this slide again. I'm staying true. There it is again, just kind of a summary of all the changes, all the modifications that we just talked through. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Will you go back to that picture?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just gonna bring this up one more time, then move on to a couple other things. But just doing some quick math here. So for council, this is my concern about ending up with Army barracks, right? So look at this area.
We're looking at the bottom section.
Right, so the pink, medium density. And tell me if I'm wrong with my numbers here, Blake. This is, so total of unplatted, so this whole area over here, right, is 1,284 units. In that pink area constitutes 965 of those units, right? And if there's no movement across the boundaries, which I guess my concern is if we make it too difficult process-wise, if I'm just doing business, right? I'm going to say, well, the current one allows me to do X, and we're just going to do X, right? If it's too cumbersome, takes too much time to go back through the process to try to improve it, then the heck with it, I'm going to make my money, right? I mean, that's 90% of the units in that area. So just something to think about.
That's
If there's
a fair point.
if there's a way that we can incorporate language and make it so that we can at least quell our concerns about it being abused, but make it so that we can potentially get something better, and it's still just something to think about.
I'll tell you, so let me, maybe as a suggestion to that.
'Cause I just, as was pointed out, I hate all these MDAs. I hate them. But and the reason is they've allowed them to do, not these guys, but any developers over there. I mean, I just hate some of the stuff that's over there. I call them Army barracks. They're just cookie cutter, and these MDAs allow them to do it. If there's a way for us to get something better.
I would be far more open to it, and this may be a discussion for staff to have with the developer. I'd be way more open to it if, they choose to come and ask for density realignments or changes, that automatically triggers a revesting in city standards in the current city laws. Because what that would do is if they want something different, they would have to upgrade to what the city says our city is going to be now. And so that would be, for me, to avoid going through the whole process of redoing a master development agreement. If they're saying we will revest in the city laws based on the date that we get the change on density, realignment, whatever it is, if they revest on the laws, then any changes we've made throughout the city over time become into effect, and we're getting something from the developer at the same time they're getting something for us. So that would be maybe a suggestion I would look at.
Whatever we can,
Every MDA.
whatever we can build
Proposed that
in,
multiple times over the course of the years.
whatever we can build in that maybe gives us some protection. On the other hand, right? If I'm on just a developer looking at the MDA going, well, I want this language to allow me to transfer, then maybe that's just a way that I can fit all the units in that maybe I wasn't going to be able to otherwise due to whatever.
But,
so we don't want that to happen either. So we have to have, if we consider anything, we need language that works. So I think it's a good idea to have you guys talk about it and see if there's something that can maybe can be
I'm
done.
willing to listen. I don't want to make it in any, I'm willing to listen. I'm not so diehard that they can't have that option if it's not the right blend for what we get out of it versus what they get out. But it cannot be a one-sided thing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where, when it comes back here, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but for me, if we were to consider something like that, there has to be an improvement to the product schedule. The other things I want to bring up is, you mentioned how many times this has been brought to us, et cetera. So I'm just going off kind of my checklist, right? One issue that is no longer an issue is the city donated property. They wanted units for that, so that's not an issue anymore. The other one was the Rosecrest MDA had to be amended. That was our sticking point, right? For Wasatch had purchased property from Rosecrest, wanted to add those units, but Rosecrest didn't want to give them up. We've amended we've amended that appropriately, so that one's done. The road alignment was the other one. I don't think there's any issues with road alignment at this point
Just as long as we see the change in 15.
for that part. And then it's this, basically this land use map, which is accounting for all the units, right? And just as I started looking at that table, right, and adding all those up, I was like, holy cow, that's, like, they're all concentrated in that one spot. So that, for me, that would be my concern is, yeah, if we can do something to help us get something better there than some of the other products we've seen in the area, not necessarily by this developer, but in the area, because that's just what happens, right? They just do the math and lay it out and go, we can do that, you can't stop us. If we can get something better, great. But yeah, I'm really concerned about it being too easy and too loose and further abuse of it. But so it's, at least by my count, I think it sounds like everything's been accounted for. And I say it this way because when I read through all of that, it just references, when I read through the actual red line version, it just references the pictures, right? It doesn't give a description. So I just want to make sure the city-owned property isn't an issue. We already took care of the amendment on the Rosecrest side. The road alignment's good, so it really just comes down to this land use map and the language.
Yeah. Does anybody disagree with summary by Councilman Anderson?
No, but just to sum up, his final statement being, it just comes down to this land use decision. That's where I have some comments and questions to make, so.
I'm done.
But I agree with the rest of it.
What have you gotten from us? What are you going to bring back to us? Because it sounds like we're going to continue it.
I have some more comments too before we're ready to go on that, so.
Go for it, Steve.
So I keep coming back to this math and this land use change. The previous land use had 96.64 acres of low-density housing with 408 units of low-density housing. In the new model, we have 67 acres of low-density housing, but only 44 units. And looking at some of these pods, I mean, we're not gonna have 2.3 acre lots up there. So the idea that we're gonna have bigger lots is the reason why we've lost, 364 units is just beyond credulity there. So what I'm seeing is 965 units of just medium density, but I don't see any specificity about what kind of properties these are going to be. Are these going to be detached single-family homes? Are these going to be attached? Are these condos? Are these townhouses? Are these apartments?
Isn't that what it says in the bottom corner there?
What in the bottom corner?
Medium, it's stacked, so apartments,
Well,
218
yeah,
stacked.
stacked are different, right? But we've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 15 are all just
Medium.
listed as medium developable units.
965 units.
965 units, but there's no specificity about what kind of units those are. And that is concerning to me. We're approving 1,000 units that we don't know what those 1,000 units are gonna be. Whereas when you have 44 units of low density, I can pretty much assume those are detached single-family homes.
To clarify, how much of this is already approved?
So all the property that isn't part of that Kunkler property, so everything, I think pods 20, 21, 9, 8, 7, those are all in that approved area.
Because a lot of this, if I understand correctly, is already, they already invested in a certain number of units, correct?
Yeah, so yeah.
Sorry, I'm interrupting, I apologize, go ahead.
Well, and I'll interrupt again because Michael Malloy has been good to kind of coach us along the way with each one of these discussions, that part of the issue with this MDA in particular, and even Rosecrest, is the language that states that, yeah, you have all these units, but we've heard over and over, they probably can't use them all because there are restrictions on the limit per area, right? So pod 9 is we'll say, I don't know, what is it?
80 units.
It has a cap of 6 units an acre.
Right.
Right? And the others, they vary a little bit.
I don't think it's the cap, I think that's the calculation.
That's what they're planning. But the zone.
That is the cap too.
So if it's,
Or it's 6, yeah.
right, so if it's R210, it's 8. But maybe the way the land lays out, they can't get 8 in there, they can only get 6 or 7, right? So they're trying to figure out a way to use as many units as they can. So I think Steve's point is good. Well, I mean, let's maybe do a real comparison with the old plan, right? Because that's really concerning. 406 units of low density to the new plan of only 44?
Yeah, that's my big concern, is that there's just, even, the density isn't really the biggest issue, it's,
Product.
I'm pretty sure we had 408 single-family detached units planned to be built, and now we have 44 that I can rely on. I don't know what number of those 965 units are gonna be single-family detached houses.
Yeah, there might be more.
And the reason I'm asking that is because that is a huge ask from our community and a huge want from our community. And if I'm voting for 1,000 units that are attached townhouses, I can't do that.
I guess the question I would have, and it might be one for John and his group or whoever, but to that point is, are we, and this, I'm directing the question to Blake right now, is really the difference between, are we just doing math on this one, trying to fit these in? Or is there a plan of how they lay out and what we're gonna end up with?
Currently, we haven't seen a plan, other than this land use plan. There's no lot layout plan like we've seen with maybe the more recent development agreements that we've done. And so, yeah, I don't know where that fits in, but I think the general plan spells out that the medium density, I'd have to look at it and see, but I think medium up to 6 is detached. And then the multifamily and the multifamily stacked are the attached housing.
And if that's the case, then we have, I'm much more inclined to understand what's going on, but I don't see that specificity in any of what's been provided so far. So if that's the case, I'd really like to verify that.
Okay.
And perhaps ask the applicant to clarify what their intention with those 965.
I would like to give the applicant a chance to speak. I know he's biting at the bit back there to speak up. But before I do, Steve, did you get through all of your items?
Yeah, that's the issue I keep coming back to, is 408 low-density housing to 44 low-density housing. It's just in good conscience, it's hard for me to approve eliminating 360 low-density housing homes, which is what people are asking for so much around here, so.
And the question is, because I know that I've, when we have these conversations, because I'm the same place, I mean, I don't want to approve new townhomes and apartments. Like, we haven't done it in 3 years. Why are we gonna, why? Because we were so overwhelmed with the percentage of what we had approved was apartments and townhomes, that we literally are still overwhelmed, and we haven't done it in 3 years.
Right.
And so why?
And we're adding 160 acres, well, 110 or whatever it is, new housing acres here, and we're losing 360 low-density units. That's the part that's frustrating, is I can't wrap my head around why.
Now, to be fair,
we're having a huge shift in the number of low-density units.
The problem is, though, that might not be completely accurate, right?
Yeah.
Because I always call these maps, finger painting, because it's really generalized. They don't know what they can fit in that area until they actually get into the engineering. This is basically a concept plan, right?
And I totally understand that.
That's why I'm trying to say, this is doing the math, trying to fit units in. What's the reality, right, that we're really looking at, old plan versus new? If we stick, but the problem is we can't stick to the old plan because MDA allows them to add that acreage at that density. So we can't just say, no, you can't add it. The MDA says they are allowed to do it. We have to let them do it. It's just give us the comfort of knowing some kind of plan.
Yeah.
And how far can we ask them to do that at this stage? Sort of thing,
And to your point, it is the math, but it's a stark, the math is a stark contrast from what it was to what it is now.
Well, I just did the quick math.
And this was actually the exact issue I brought up 2 weeks ago when we talked about this in the work session ahead of it coming to council, was the fact that there was a substantial swing in the low density residential in that, and how does that affect the overall plan?
At least in my time, the concept of this area was, okay, well, we let them do, and it's not just, when I say them, not just this developer, but Rosecrest and everybody else, we let them do higher density on the eastern side of Mountain View, and the concept was always to do lower density on the other side. So that swing is hard, and the 965 out of the 1284 is almost bang on 75%, right, for that whole area. So
Anyway, I would like, as our staff has a conversation with the developer about changes to the agreement. I think I know what the answer is going to be pretty quick and pretty hard, but I'd like to have the conversation offline about the possibility of removing the ability to add additional acreage and automatically get approved density on that acreage. I assume I know what the answer is going to be on that, but I'd at least like you to have the conversation offline.
Can we let John speak for a minute?
Now, yeah, I was like, if we've kind of gone over, because I want to make sure we hit everything that we're really concerned with first, so that he has an opportunity to address those things. Do we have any other concerns?
That's really my, because I think, so, in general, this is a pretty good plan, right? I mean, we're moving the density down towards Mountain View Corridor, I think there's a lot of this that has great merit, but there's some specific issues in here that I still would like to get clarity on.
All right, so, John, do you want to come up? I know you're super excited every time we...
I think his attorney is also on the line, is that correct?
I think the last like 4 times we talked about this, we didn't let him say anything, so.
Oh, I finally get to talk. All right.
Finally gonna talk, John.
Good
Yes, but-
evening, Mayor, Council.
But you only have 2
Thank you very
minutes.
much.
Only 2 minutes, right?
Okay, we're going down the wrong road here. So first off, let me try to clarify and make you feel better about some of these things that are starting to cause fires, right? So first, the amendment 4.3 text amendment. The idea behind this was to do what we've done with Harriman City, which is engage in a dialogue, come to each other and to discuss plans, thoughts we have, moving things around, and trying to make a better product for the community. That was a segue to open up that conversation. If you want to delete that, I'm fine deleting that. What it's going to do for us is just basically make us follow the plan. I don't think it's wise to do that. I think that engaging in that conversation to be able to suggest something should be the basis of a city-developer relationship. And that's all that's intended to do was open up that dialogue. It's certainly not to circumvent any sort of a process or give us any sort of ability to do anything that's not already spelled out in our MDA. So if there's any question with that, I'm fine just striking that language because I don't want it to hold us up. It's not intended to do that. It's supposed to help us. So,
You guys okay talking it over and adding language that
we have.
help us?
I thought that that's exactly what we were trying to do because when we explained that that's what we want to add this, what happened was when we wanted to move density around to do something better, say for example like the Soleil apartments, we had to have that dialogue. Recently, when this came up, it was explained to us, you can't ask. And I said, well, of course we can ask.
What?
We can ask for anything as long as it's reasonable. We'll come to the council and explain something and say, here's the reasons why we're suggesting to do this. You may disagree, and we can walk away and say, okay.
Did
But
that I'm sorry, you're saying you were told that you weren't allowed to ask
Yes.
for density changes?
The language said you cannot ask for that because
MDA
the
was
language is
specific.
being interpreted that we didn't have the ability to ask. And I said, well, we got to revise that. We got to add language that says we can ask, right?
So just keep
So
going,
that's where the premise from that additional language came from was let's open up the ability for us to talk about something that we may want to agree to change. And that's all that it is. So like I say, it's not there to create anything for us as developers. It's just there to open up that dialogue. This plan, as I think Jared alluded to, is grabbing what we have as entitlements in our agreement that already exists from 2008 that allows us to buy additional property, bring it in, acquire land, and roll up the 4.5. You're exactly right that all we're doing is we're trying to utilize that, right? It doesn't do us any good to have a bank of units somewhere that we can't put in here. So what we thought we would do is follow, like the MDA says, the 2008 ordinance, right? The general plan that says we're supposed to follow that general plan. Now, if I've got units from acquiring property that still follows the general plan, we're going to put it in there and say this is our maximum residential units. It still follows the general plan. We're doing exactly what the MDA says, and so that's why you see an increase as such. And so with this in mind, this is our maximum residential units. What you have is in the Third Amendment, a processing protocol in the MDA that requires us to bring you a site plan at that time that says, here's what we're proposing to build, here's the lots, here's the average density of the lot, here's all these things that we have historically have done as far as how we're going to develop and lay out this property. It is more than likely this is going to be a very low dense area. This is a hillside. This is a community that has gorgeous views use. This thing begs for exclusivity and the large lots and everything that I think Harriman lacks, needs, and our market studies say is very wise for us to build. Now, certainly there's going to be some areas down around the corridor with general planning principles in mind we're going to use as a little bit higher density. But we don't want to build more apartments down here. We know that the city's got 47, 48% of attached housing problem. We know that we want to do single-family detached lots. So we're going to be responsible in building that. This plan is only bringing in what we are entitled to bring in as far as units, following the general plan and placing them somewhere. And that's all that that's doing. So by approving this, you're not necessarily approving, 6 units per acre in a certain area, and that's not exactly what you're getting. You're going to get a chance to have the developer bring back a plan that shows you what we're laying out as far as lots go. And to comment on removing items, so we have given a lot in this negotiation that we necessarily don't have to do, right? From my perspective, what we're asking for is clearly spelled out in our existing agreement. I'm not asking for anything that's not spelled out in that agreement, very, very precisely. And then what we're giving are things that are not spelled out in our agreement. The city's asking for larger right-of-ways, different cross-sections, different trail descriptions, and we're giving these things because you know what? We agree that this is better for the community. We know that you've adopted ordinances since 2008 that make sense for the community. So we've given those things, and that's in good faith and in good resolution between us in negotiation. We see that we don't have to give these things. So giving up language to take away things, we look at it and say, that's probably not the right direction for us to go. Let's just focus on a good partnership. We will give things that make sense for the community. We're going to build a good product. Hopefully we've demonstrated that that's what we've done in the past, and this plan is just adopting what we already have in an agreement. So I don't know if I can be any quicker than that.
I appreciate that feedback, in all honesty. I think that feedback's helpful.
Sure.
And I think it's unfortunate that at times the actions of people who have been before this council prior are result in the actions we take now.
For sure.
So sometimes the things that other people have done will affect the conversations we have with you and you as a developer. But I appreciate that feedback, and I think it's helpful to help me understand kind of what we're looking at. What
Absolutely.
I would do in that case is one of the things that John here said is that, they get to come back, bring back a plan, we get to start talking about it. I would like you to review that as the attorney and make sure that that is truly in there and that we can have a discussion about, this is the maximum, but let's have a discussion about density once it actually gets to a point where we get to have a discussion about it. And when I say we, I mean the council, not the planning commission.
Right.
So on that thought, I think, okay, yeah, let's see if we can get there. I'm comfortable. I'm more comfortable with that, but I would also like to make sure that we've put in those safety nets for us.
Absolutely.
I absolutely believe you when you say those things. You've been a good partner to our city for years. I don't think that we've had some really great projects that come from the development company that you represent. It's for me, a lot of this is I'm doing my best to make sure that we are protecting our residents in every way that we can because we have been
Rightfully so.
had issues in the past. So with that being said, that is what I would like to see from our attorney before I would be willing to vote on this item, so that we can make sure that those safeties are in place, that we have the option to have the discussion about density and all those other things before we actually get to the point where shovels are moving and concrete is being poured and we don't have that option anymore.
Absolutely.
So
And
that's-
I'm sorry, one last thing I want to add. The technical guidelines, you brought up a good point. Bear in mind, the planning commission's already adopted and approved those. So they've gone through the course, we've answered questions, and they do comply as much as we possibly can with city standards and everything. So, and those have been approved by the planning commission.
It's mostly a pet peeve for me more than anything
Absolutely.
else, so.
Yeah.
Any thoughts after John has spoken to us, or do you guys?
Lots.
Go for it, Jared.
Not that I want to talk about lots, but I'm just always thinking about stuff. But just back to my kind of line of reasoning or thought about, okay, what are we really looking at here, right? Are we looking at the site plan that you mentioned is a different step, right? So I guess I'm coming back to it this way after 5 years sitting up here and a couple years before that sitting there as a resident trying to learn how this stuff works. I guess is what I'm trying to square with as what we're tasked with at this stage is to amend the land use because land has been added as is allowed by the MDA. We're required to. We can't just say, no, stick with the old plan because new property has been added and you get to do that. And so we have to adjust this somehow. What I'm afraid of is getting what we've gotten from other areas. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is to David's point. If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't be thinking this way. With every other developer that at least I've dealt with, they don't think about doing something better. It's just what can we fit in there? What are we allowed to do? And we just go do it, and we get what we've gotten. You guys have had, at least for me, a track record of doing things better, actually bringing things to us and improving on what's allowed because you want a better product yourselves. So I want to enable that if we can somehow. That's where I started thinking, well, if we don't allow that somehow, if I'm in their shoes, I'm just going to go, well, they obviously don't want that. We're just going to put the 965 in there as best we can, and if that's cookie cutter, that's cookie cutter. We tried. So hopefully we can find some language that fits, that it alleviates our concerns. But the next part is the hard part, I think, for me, and I think what Steve's trying to get at, and probably articulated better than me, is it's tough for us to look at this and look at the numbers, right, and not know how it's going to lay out. But I think, at least what I've learned so far, and you correct me if I'm wrong, John, you guys don't know how it's really going to lay out yet, right? I mean, looking at the land and the grade and saying, okay, this is where potentially it can go. But when we get to pod 8, the land itself might not allow us to put the units there that we've put on this chart. Correct. We won't know that until we actually get to the next stage. Correct. To do it. And that's, I think, is the hard part for us to understand that is the next stage and that this is a conceptual only. I don't know that we can really ask for that final plan at this stage.
Yeah, because
and Clinton has better experience from the planning commission that way.
I think if we can put
Nor do we want to ask for the final plan at this stage.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we can make sure we get that assurance
So how,
later.
to Steve's point though, so how do we do our job to safeguard the things that we need to at this stage?
Yeah, and let me add, John, thanks so much for saying what you said. I really appreciate it. And I think Wasatch has shown to be a good partner here, trying to do things that are innovative, creative, improving in the community, trying to make things that are at least, aesthetically pleasing as well as functional, right? I appreciate the approach that you guys have brought to development in our city. And I understand that you're laying these out because you have so many units that the MDA entitles you to, and this is about the only way you can figure out how to get all those laid out. So you're saying, okay, this is how we would lay out that many units. I appreciate you also saying that it's not necessarily your intention to max all the units out in every single one of those pods. You don't even know exactly what you're going to be able to build there yet until you get all the engineering and the slope calculated and all that kind of stuff. You just don't know how that's all going to work out. So I appreciate that too. And for what it's worth, I believe that you're going to lean towards those things that the market is telling you this hillside is begging for, these beautiful view lots and single-family homes. I mean, it's just going to go crazy. And I think you guys are going to build some really gorgeous, crazy, expensive, beautiful, gorgeous homes that people are going to love in this community. And I believe that. The hard part is, I think what Jared's articulating is, how can I guarantee that for the residents of Harriman? And I know there's an agreement that's in place that doesn't necessarily grant them that privilege to have that guarantee, right? I mean, there was an agreement made, in 2008? I didn't even live in the city of Harriman in 2008, so. Yep. There are decisions that predate this council. On the other hand, I'm on the council now and I'm trying to do everything I can to best represent the residents of my district and the residents of the city and express what their desires and their wants and their hopes are for the development in this and all areas of the city. So for what it's worth, I understand that our hands are tied at some point, somewhat, but I'm also asking to try and say, what can we do to address what these concerns are? How can I report to my residents that we are, hopeful, optimistic, we have a plan, not just hoping, but there's a plan for this that is more in line with what those hopes and dreams are, even if they're not necessarily specifically aligned with what the MDA entitles you to.
The best way the MDA answered that question at the time was the 2008 general plan. That's exactly what it's intended to do, is we follow that. And honestly, I don't even like that 2008 general plan. I don't think anybody now would look at it and say, well, this is exactly how we want it, because you had open space in areas that should have been developed, and you had developed areas that were on 30% slopes that it didn't make any sense, right? The general plan is exactly that. It's just general in nature. And all we're supposed to do is just follow it generally, right? So what we're trying to do is just still follow that general plan, so you're not getting something that would be disingenuous as us coming in and saying, at the top of this mountain, I want a, multifamily, high-density, stacked product with 600 units. That's what protects you in that MDA. And the thing is that I understand the unique position that you're in as a body is that you're bound to this MDA. And there may be things that you don't like in it, but you have to follow it, right? It's the law. It's an agreement. We have this recorded over the property. So the things we're asking for, I've made dang sure do not cross that in any way. I'm not going to come and ask for something that puts you in a position to have to approve something that's outside of that MDA. So your constituents need to look at it and say, okay, well, the city understands this MDA, and they understand very well that it has certain assurances that are for the developer and certain assurances that are for the city. And there's a lot of assurances that you're not being seen that benefit the city that don't benefit the developer, for example. For me, it's going to cost a lot of money to put streetlights in the neighborhood, but I said, it's the right thing to do. Let's go ahead and add that, and that's the part that we're trying to show in good faith, and I think some of this just requires that good faith. To see what we're doing is following good faith negotiations and saying, you know what, you're right, we should do that in this neighborhood because it's the right thing to do. It's better for the community, it's safer for kids, the list goes on and on. So there isn't anything that's going to give you that ability necessarily that you're looking for. You're looking for that one thing that says, I can turn this back and I'm going to require this to come back. Because unfortunately, we've got a processing protocol that says we don't have to follow that rule. We actually defined our process because years ago, before you were elected, it was something I had to go through, that we had a very loose process. And so we all agreed to let's define that process. And now it's part of our governing text that says this is the process we're supposed to follow. And we're following that, So there is an amount of good faith, I guess, that I can say. I can't say, just trust me, because I know that the city is going to run into situations in the past that, you'll get burned, and I get that. But that's the whole point of the MDA. It's not to answer every single question. It's to lay out something that provides assurances to the developer, assurances to the city, to follow a plan that we mutually agreed upon, to allow certain things to happen, and to make sure certain things don't happen. And right now, we're doing all of that. So I don't know if there's, a foundation that would allow you to decline it, essentially, because there's nothing we're not following in the MDA.
Yeah.
But the responsible side is our reputation in this community. As you all know, we have a profound situation in this community, and we're trying to maintain that all the time. We don't become successful by burning cities that we have long-term vested, assets in. So for us, it's developing a project up here that we've spent a lot of money studying, that we're going to follow what the recommendations are from people who know a lot more about this than all of us here, and say this is the right thing to do up here and provide a diverse community that benefits everyone in this community. So you have product all the way from an apartment to a small 4,000 square foot lot to a townhome, even to a larger lot, and people stay here in the residence because there's a diverse product base. And we see the opportunity to do that there. But in the meantime, I have to follow the guidelines set in the development agreement that says if we acquire property, we get to add it, and we have to follow the general plan. And that's all that this step is doing.
John, I think you've hit on something that, at least for me, I don't think has been part of our conversations about this yet. What are some of the things that you guys are doing as part of this amendment that you don't have to do? You mentioned streetlights,
The driveways, there was that slide, go back to the slide.
I don't think we've really had a detailed explanation of the things you guys have agreed to.
There was
There's a slide here.
that he gave us right there.
I could probably wing them off the top of my head. The right-of-ways were something, there's bigger standards for certain roads. Now, it's only a couple feet, but when you're talking about 600 acres, it's a lot of acreage that we're giving up that can't be developed, right? So the right-of-ways, pathways, the jogging trails, the street lights. Driveways. There was one that it didn't make sense, and it was because it was a private driveway that it had to have curbs, but to us, it was because we're worried about the deterioration of the asphalt, but it's maintained privately. So if someone's got a private driveway and it's deteriorating, they're responsible to maintain it, and it's not the city's problem. So we didn't necessarily give in on that one because we just felt it was kind of moot in a sense. Blake, do you remember the other ones? I could probably go pull my notebooks out and.
We're looking at the list of them.
You just described it better than the technical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that we said, okay, yeah, flag lots. I'll tell you right now, that's kind of a tough one because in a hillside terrain, sometimes that's the only way that you can develop is through flag lots. But I'll give you this, that I haven't laid out precisely a plan to bring into you, but trust me, I've done enough studying. If I'm willing to give up on flag lots, that tells you how comfortable I am with my lot layout so far. So you're not gonna see something that I'm going to give up on that is going to hurt us, obviously, because it doesn't make sense. But if I don't need flag lots, yeah, let's take it out. You know, let's build some assurances for the city and take those things out. Stormwater makes sense. A lot of these are just updating to standards, the fire code stuff. You know what? It's no brainer.
And John, I think what Jared was hinting at, what you said is, I think it's important. I mean, there's going to be, 5 people in the city who actually go back and listen to this whole conversation.
Sure.
That many? But for those 5 people, I'd like to, record this for posterity. This conversation that we're having is, look, we don't necessarily have the ability. I think we're just realizing we're bound by decisions made by previous councils before us, before any of us served on this council, that say this is the agreement and this is the way it has to be. On the other hand, I think we can at least say that, staff, this council, you as a developer have come to the realization that we're updating an agreement that was signed 12 years ago. Right. And because of that, there are common sense things that we should do to upgrade this agreement that are a cost and a detriment to you, but you're doing them because it does make sense. It brings it up to reasonable standards that the city has adopted since 2008. And I think we should acknowledge that that's happening too. This isn't just, hey, city,
right.
You owe us this and we're going to get it. This has been a negotiation. This has been a process. This has been lots and lots of things being changed and modified and added and agreed. So it's not just a one-sided deal. This is some give and take, and I appreciate you pointing that out, and I think that's what Jared was hinting at.
Yeah, and I appreciate the staff for following up on what we asked for, right? We asked you guys to push back in these situations and go for some of these things, but I think it's worth noting that every one of these bullet points represents real money, right? I mean, like significant costs, which is why most of the other developers just thumb their nose when we bring it up and say, nope, we don't have to.
Yeah, because they don't have to. I think that's the whole point, is that we are not looking at this as a new development agreement and trying to negotiate a development agreement with him. This is in place. This is what he is entitled to. And he doesn't have to do any of this, right? All this, but he's saying, okay, we'll agree to that, because not only will he agree to it, but certainly it'll be a cost to you, but it'll also make a better development for you, right? If they look around, these standards are put in place because they make a better development. These driveways and park strips and all these things make it better development. So while it's initially a cost to you, it actually is a benefit to both of us, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I guess that's the hardest thing, is that when we look at it, we try and calculate this out. We're negotiating this agreement. We're really not. It's been negotiated many years ago. Right. And so the only thing that we can do is try and make it better. And
it doesn't mean we're not trying. I mean,
no, for sure, for sure. But that's why I am supportive of the language at first. Maybe we need to nail it down a little bit. It needs to certainly say city council instead of just city, those types of things. But to me, that language pretty much just said, we're going to bring it to the city council. If you don't like it, I guess we don't go that way. You know what I mean? It left it all to where we controlled the whole thing. So maybe it's
I'll
good for
add to
you
that.
guys.
I mean, the spirit of the 4.3 language is for exactly this, for us to come together and
Yeah.
the city wins big on something like this. If we don't have that discussion, then I just go
agreed.
by what the MDA says and we just basically do exactly like you suggested. That's not what we want to do. This is something that's better for everybody, right? So not necessarily us, but we understand that it makes a better sellable product. Builders who are going to sell to are going to want to see things like this because they're going to agree with it as well too.
Yeah,
It's-
win-win.
It's a win-win, and we're always trying to focus, honestly, on win-wins. I mean, everything we try to do is try to be around something that has that spirit. So,
And quite frankly, if I think about Soleil, I don't know that I can promote your product, but when I was there to, and this is an apartment development in our community, which we hear a lot of negative things about apartments, but it was the only one in the world, or as I recall, when it was first built, with its capabilities, with its
yeah, North America, for sure.
yeah, for sure. So, I mean, yeah, think about that. The only one in North America that was energy efficient like those apartments were. So I think that you're trying hard to, even in products that people are not superly excited about, make them better.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So just so that we can move on here.
Sorry, I have one more thing to beat him up on.
You get one more
I'll
thing
be
to beat
good
him up
cop, you
on.
be bad cop.
The open space. As is mentioned, this is really a hilly area. This is under the prior rules that didn't require a certain percentage to be usable, sort of thing. How much of this that we're seeing on this map is usable?
I'm sorry.
To me, that means programmable. It's not just a hillside.
Yeah,
Whether it's a-
first, I'll always start with the good things, plus on our side, 20 is our minimum. I think we're somewhere around 30-something% of open space. So we're already giving way more open space than we have to. Now, some may say, well, that's because they're steep mountains and you can't use them anyways. Not necessarily. We have a sand and gravel lease agreement where we can take down those mountains if we wanted to and turn them into developed space. We can flatten the whole thing if we wanted to. We don't want to do that. It's not right for the community. It's not right for the feel of this environment. We're leaving some of these hills so that you have great, gorgeous views on multiple lots. I mean, so we're
Jared,
giving a
that's
ton
the
of
map in
space
front
that
of
we
us
could
that
create
shows
as
the
developable
30%.
space, you know? So having it be up and around 30-something% is a huge win for the city. And we plan on turning that into interconnected mountain biking trails and jogging trails and putting in trailheads. And this is a very amenity-rich area. For us, we've learned in our developments, you can either just build something and try to sell it at value, or you can actually go and create the value. Here, we're creating the value. In other developments, we've created the value. So we're going to do the same thing in this area. We're going to partner with some of the best builders, and we're going to go to them and say, this is what we've committed to, and this is what the city's going to get out of this. So out of that area, the reason why we had to change it from the 08 general plan was because it didn't make sense for that connectivity. And so we've given a lot of thought of how is this all going to be connected, and how are people going to be able to use these trails effectively and still have a neighborhood that intertwines through that. So there obviously will be some areas that become steep. We've left them somewhat native, and that not 100% of all open space is, usable as what you'd like, but it's in a hillside neighborhood, that's pretty common. Thing is, that's why we're giving so much more than.
Hey, I hear we can cut our own trails now, so.
I hear you can maintain them too, it's great.
But I have to say, John, I like that answer, right? That you can either leave it as is and build, or we can create and sell it at value, or we can create the value, and just a little bit of work creates that value, and you guys have done that. So that satisfies me for today.
So it is my understanding that we're going to have staff review this a little bit, tweak it a little bit, and bring it back to us. We're going to still need a motion on tabling it for a future.
Continue it to the next.
Yes. So is that a motion?
What do we say? What is
I
the
think
language?
the
to
next
the
meeting
next
should be easy. All we need
meeting
is
determined by
language,
staff?
a couple of little things to,
The 4.3.
yeah, to that one sentence, right, for.
And that clarification, making
Satisfied
sure
legal.
that the actual plans have to come back to us.
Right.
Just
That's in
verify
the
that that
Third
happens.
Amendment.
It's
isn't
Because
it?
I
part of the processing
understand-
protocol goes to planning commission, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys want to see site plans or not, but I think it's designed to just go through planning commission, but as a.
It comes back to the city and they can beat you up over
Exactly.
every ounce of
Yeah.
density that you're.
Yes, we count blades of grass and things like that. Yeah.
So,
The last amendment that was done to
The
this.
Third Amendment. yeah.
Was actually spelled out the process of how developments come through. So we can bring that last amendment that was
Just-
adopted.
I think we've made clear what we're looking for. We're just looking for that verification and the clarification on that one
I read
line.
it the other day.
With that, I'm open to a motion.
Motion to continue resolution number R37, 2020, approving the Fourth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement for the South Hills Master Plan Community until the next appropriate meeting as determined by staff. Okay.
Either the 5th or the 18th.
Stop it. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes as a continuation. We appreciate everyone that has joined us tonight. That brings us, if I look at my
Troopers
agenda,
over there, long
to
lasters.
the end of our general meeting. Our next special meeting is the 5th of November. We have another special, our November 5th is also a Planning Commission meeting. November 18th is a City Council work meeting and a City Council meeting at 7 p.m. Please be aware that Veterans Day is coming up on the 11th of November. Our city offices will be closed that day. So please schedule around that if you need to come into the city to take care of your business with the city.
This Saturday night is the end of daylight savings time.
This Saturday night is also Halloween.
It's going to get
So,
dark.
as a reminder, please, community, remember, we have a lot of small children in our community. Halloween is a night where we will have, regardless of how you feel about the current situation, we will most likely have lots of kids. Please make sure you're paying attention. We want to keep all of our families safe this Halloween. And then we also do have daylight saving times that night as well. So it's going to be a really long Halloween night. So with that, we need to move into a closed session. So I will accept a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual in pending or reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code. Annotated 52-4-205.
Second.
Motion is second. Jared?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. We will take a couple-minute break as we invite those who are in attendance to please leave. Go home, guys. We appreciate it.
Go home, get to sleep, go to school.